Your son made me pregnant. Excuse me? Pay $30,000 as alimony. When I picked up the restaurant's phone, I was told that with a young woman's voice suddenly. She was utterly one-sided in the conversation and not even giving her name. I completely underestimated that must be a prank call. So I never expected that this call would lead to such a mess. My name is Melissa Brown. This may sound self-flattering, but I run a popular restaurant somewhere in New York City. We have been featured on national television and in magazines, and thanks to that almost every seat for lunch and dinner is booked every day. However, because of being famous, nuisance calls and aggressive sales pitches increased. So I got quite sloppy with this call because I thought it was just another prank. But when I was told over the phone to my restaurant that got pregnant, I was actually taken aback and I could hardly understand what she was saying. I do have a son, but the thought of him getting someone pregnant seemed absurd. Yet this prank call with its shocking accusations intrigued me. I decided to listen to her story for a bit out of fun. I had an abortion. What are you going to do about the wounds on my body and soul? Pay for the surgery too. First off, if I may ask who I am speaking to? Even when dealing with prank calls, one of the challenges of the service industry is having to respond politely. It would be a nuisance if our conversation were recorded and exaggerated with false information being spread around. I'm a customer at your restaurant. Is that the first thing you have to say to me after your son hurt me? Your family lacks both common sense and compassion. I find it hard to believe my son would do such a thing. My staff in the kitchen and at the counter glance over at me as they sense this isn't a usual dinner reservation call. I smiled and waved at them to make them feel safe and assuring them that everything is all right. Your son assaulted me on a dark street. And you recognized him in the dark? Of course. But are you sure it was my son? Don't play dumb. I'm absolutely certain. It was your son who lives with you. I've been so scared since then, I even can't go out alone. What are you going to do about this? She started detailing how the assault had happened. I think you might be mistaking my son for someone else. But this seems like a serious matter. Can we meet in person to discuss it? Most people who make prank calls like these tend to shy away from meeting face-to-face. So suggesting a meeting is a good way to get them to back down. In the beginning I was merely entertaining her call out of fun, but as it seemed to be dragging on, I proposed the meeting to end the call soon. You saying, meet with the criminal's parent? How dare you suggest that kind of thing to a victim? But I'd like to verify your story in person. Are you saying I'm lying? That's not what I mean. To be honest, I wanted to say you're lying, aren't you, but I held back. Then she started berating me and saying, I can't believe a person like you is a business owner. Why don't we meet and talk about this anyway? No matter how many times I suggested it, she continually refused to meet. I see. So what do you want me to do? Pay me alimony. $30,000. But it's a case of mistaken identity anyways, and also I can't afford such a large amount of money. You can pay. I know your business is thriving. Pay it or I'll sue you. Even though my business is thriving, it's just a small place and $30,000 is a large amount of money and I don't even intend to pay. Are you sure you want to involve the police? I don't mind. At my unhesitant response, the woman fell silent for a moment. If my son truly did such a thing, I should hold him accountable as a parent. But I don't think he did. You're pretty confident he didn't do it, huh? Maybe you should have some doubts about your own son. I would believe it if there was evidence. Do you have any? Evidence? I'd be troubled if you asked me for money without any proof. There was silence on the other end of the phone as the woman seemed to be contemplating something. "If there's no proof, I'm hanging up." I said that and trying to end the call, then. "Hold on. If there's evidence, you'll pay the alimony, right?" "Well, I would consider it." "Then wait. I'll bring the evidence." With that, she hung up the phone almost as soon as she had finished speaking. "Owner, are you all right?" "There's no problem. It's just a prank call." One of my employees, Mr. Murphy, voiced his concern, so I reassured him like that. There's no way she has any proof, so I don't expect she'll call back again. But I have an uneasy feeling that she might barge in and cause a scene at the restaurant. In the evening, while preparing for dinner, I had completely forgotten about the phone call. Mr. Murphy ran up to me, holding a manila envelope in his hand with his face as pale as a ghost. "What's the matter? It's not like you to run in the restaurant." "Owner, this came." What he handed me was a letter. "Ms. Melissa Brown, I was assaulted and impregnated by your son. Please transfer $30,000 as alimony." Written below were the bank transfer details, and the recipient's name was Karen Williams. Mr. Murphy was pale and disturbed because he was the first to see the contents of the unsealed and unsigned letter. "Calm down. But you know my son, right?" Hearing this, he seemed relieved. There was something else in the envelope. I pulled it out, and it was a pregnancy test. What's that?" This commotion attracted the other employees. All of them seemed taken aback. Could it really be the owner's son? Some employees gave me a contemptuous look, but they were quickly convinced when I explained. I put away the things that had been sent on my desk and returned to my usual work. A few days passed without transferring any money, but during this time there was an unsettling incident. "Owner, this came again." Mr. Murphy came with the manila envelope in his hand and looking fed up. "I see. Check the contents and put it away in the usual place." Recently, these harassing letters had been dropped in the restaurant's mailbox many times a day. "Are you planning to run? Pay up. The owner is a parent of a criminal. Her son got a college girl pregnant and didn't even apologize. The owner of this restaurant is a heartless and cruel woman with no sincerity. Irresponsible, overprotective, toxic parent. It's your fault your son became like that. Take responsibility. I'll make sure no customers come to this restaurant. It's for the good of the world, for the good of the people. I wonder what would make customers stop coming to a restaurant. Like those restaurants where they put that greasy, black, and disgusting thing in the food. I wouldn't go there again, that's for sure." The content escalates progressively, and the last part is practically a threat. Thankfully, no claims have been made that anything is actually in our food. But the constant anxiety that we might be set up is exhausting. Amid all this, something caught my attention. Well, again, a vacant seat increased at lunch. The number of customers was just gradually decreasing. Yes, it's unusual. Today we even had 2 tables empty. My thoughts went out to the poor ingredients waiting to be prepared in the kitchen. "Owner!" I looked up at Mr. Murphy's call to see him heading my way with his laptop. "Look at this review site!" On the laptop screen, the latest reviews were filled with harsh, slanderous comments. Bad customer service. They don't listen to the customers. Especially the owner, who seems to be getting full of herself after appearing on TV and in magazines. The food is getting worse. The soup taste was way more plain than the last time I visited. I saw an employee drop a piece of meat before grilling and sneak it back. Every single day poor reviews were posted, causing our star rating to plummet. I realized that I was shaking with anger. It's unacceptable. Why should this restaurant, which we've worked so hard to build with the intention of pleasing our customers, be wounded by such baseless accusations? Are the preparations progressing? An unfamiliarly low and cold voice involuntarily slipped from my mouth. Yes, they're almost completed. Upon hearing Mr. Murphy's response, I couldn't help but smirk. It's been a week since we discovered the slanderous comments on the review site. Since then, the number of customers has continued to dwindle. When I stepped out into the dining area, Mr. Anderson, a regular, was sitting at the counter next to a young woman. Mr. Anderson, thank you as always. It's tough for you lately, Melissa. When I greeted him, Mr. Anderson offered me words of consolation. Well, this job is my lifeline. I smiled and replied. Mr. Anderson shook his head sympathetically then. You're strong. Especially considering your son's predicament. But don't lose hope. I'm on your side, Melissa. We'll support your son as he atones for his actions. What? I was taken aback and couldn't understand what he was talking about. Well, I noticed this place is quieter than usual, so I was wondering what happened. Then this young lady here kindly showed me a web page about this restaurant. With that, he gestured towards the pretty woman in her early 20s sitting next to him. I really feel for you. I love this place, so I thought I'd come here more often to help out in any way I can. Come to think of it, I recalled seeing this girl in the restaurant quite frequently recently. Excuse me, but what's written here is a misunderstanding. The regulars here were wondering why the place has been so empty recently. So I explained it to them. What? I doubted my own ears and trying to make sense of what she was saying. I mean, isn't it sad not to know the truth? Besides, I thought the owner would be happy to know that people like me and Mr. Anderson still come to this place. You've been spreading online rumors which we're not even sure of to our patrons? I unintentionally raised my voice, forgetting all about formality. Wow, it's scary. The internet says the owner is a terrible person and I thought it wasn't true. But it seems you really are like the parent of a man who assaulted women. I suggest that you should apologize if you think you did something wrong. She twisted away from me. Her movements were as if she expected me to punch her even though I had not raised a hand. Miss, that's not a nice way to talk. Melissa is probably tired from all the things happening. Mr. Anderson defended me, but that wasn't the point. I was about to explain that the fundamental issue was different than suddenly her bag fell from the back of her chair. It must have moved while she was twisting and turning. Despite my simmering rage towards her, my service industry instinct kicked in and I moved to pick up her bag. But then I saw it. Karen Williams. The name written on the student ID card that had fallen out stopped me in my tracks. No worries, I'll pick it up myself. She hurriedly got off her chair to pick up her bag and ID, but I got there first. Hey, give it back. But it wasn't a mistake. That name was the one on that letter with a pregnancy test, which wouldn't serve as evidence of anything. So it was you. I've been looking for you, Karen Williams. I must have swapped it with a friend's by mistake. I'm not Karen. Your face and the one on the ID are the same. Interesting. So you're a student at Central College. No, I'm telling you, you're mistaken. Beside her, who started being flustered, Mr. Anderson was clearly puzzled and having no idea what was going on. I'm going to sue you. My words spoken in front of a few scattered patrons caused everyone in the bar to turn around. What? What did I do? I believe you're the one who knows really well what you did. Since we're all here, why don't we let everyone hear? I looked around the bar. It was mostly filled with regulars. While it's nice to have regulars, It meant that almost no new customers were coming in. I couldn't help but feel furious about this young woman disrupting our business. Let me start. Are you the one who called claiming my son assaulted you and impregnated you? Demanding alimony? I glared at her and pressing her for an answer. Yes, that's me. I'm the one your son assaulted. Seeing that there was no way to deny it anymore, she admitted it surprisingly readily. What? You want to embarrass me in front of all these people? This could backfire, you know, considering the reputation of your bar. She crossed her arms defiantly and completely brazen. Her attitude only served to fuel my anger further. Mr. Murphy, bring everything over. I instructed him to hurry up and bring me a laptop from the store's office along with a stack of envelopes and documents that could be about 4 inches high. Was it you who kept sending harassing letters to the store over and over again? I read some of the letters in a loud voice so that other customers in the store can hear. Pay up or run. This owner is a criminal's parent. Her son impregnates a college girl and doesn't even apologize. Poor souls being forced to eat food from this woman's restaurant. I'm sure I'm going to make customers not come to the store. It's for the greater good. Some were covering their mouths at the harsh words among the regulars who heard the content. This is completely threatening. There's no evidence that I sent this letter. Maybe some outsider who heard the rumors sent it just for fun. As she was desperately making excuses, I silently opened my laptop and presented her with the screen of another review site. Some of you here may have seen this, the defamation on this review site. You did this too, right? I'm saying, where is the evidence? Are you all right in the head? Evidence, evidence. You seem to love evidence so much. Even though the one you presented is such a mess. I showed the first received letter and the pregnancy test to Mr. Anderson, who was nearby. This is the pregnancy test she brought as evidence. What do you think? Isn't this red line just a marker? Even my old eyes can see that. The customers who were listening started to buzz. But this might not prove that I was assaulted, but it doesn't prove that I'm wrong either. No matter what happens, she is insisting and shouting angrily that she is the victim. I was assaulted by your son. He said it himself. It's disrespectful to doubt that. The customers are whispering in hushed tones and seems not sure whom to believe. Since I, the victim, am saying it, it must be absolutely true. She started to cry as if to attract sympathy. Well, I'll prove it then. My son, he's 3 years old yet. Upon hearing this decisive fact, she let out a small "What?" as if deflated. My son may be a bit rambunctious and strong for a 3-year-old, but there's no way he could assault you. No way. I know you have a big son. You live together, right? I even have a picture. I heard you talking about dinner. Saying that, she pulled out her smartphone and showed a picture of what looked like a young man talking to me at the back door of the store. Oh, isn't that Taylor? See. You do have 2 sons. Perhaps regaining confidence from correctly naming the person in the photo, her tone increased. That's not correct. I immediately denied what she said. Then who is this person? Don't tell me he's your lover? Having an affair with a younger guy and then that guy impregnates a college girl, what a scandal. Not only is your store done for, but your marriage too. To her triumphant words, I revealed something. This person, this is my niece. Your niece? Yes, and actually it's a girl. I explained that my niece is tomboyish and is often mistaken for a boy even as an adult. She's a college student, and as she boards at my place, I ask her to cook dinner and pick up my son as a form of rent payment. If you need evidence, Want me to bring her in person for you to check? I told this to her, who stood there shocked and seemingly unable to hear me. By the way, I've already gathered all the evidence about the harassment letter and the posts on the review site. Evidence? No way. She seemed like she might collapse any second and turned to face me weakly. I've already consulted with the police and my attorney. I explained step by step the preparations I've made with the help of Mr. Murphy, one of my employees. The first piece of evidence was a letter from her with fingerprints that matched those found on the harassment letter. All posts on the review site were confirmed to be from the same person after a disclosure request. With no way out, she sunk to the floor as she drained. You were just saying that it's better to apologize quickly if you've done something wrong, weren't you? She mumbled something while looking pale and looking down, but I couldn't make out whether it was an apology. I will contact the police about you. I'll inform your parents and your college as well. Be prepared for a lawsuit for emotional distress damages. No, please don't do that. I'm still a student. Please spare me. You may be a student, but you're an adult, over 18 years old. You will take responsibility for your actions. I can't handle that. Please, stop. Subsequently, I filed a criminal complaint against Karen Williams for defamation and business obstruction, as well as for damages to the shop. Apparently, she had always been a big spender, buying brand bags and clothes on credit, and ended up committing these crimes after she was unable to make her payments. As a result, she was expelled from her college. This incident even made the news, and I've heard that now she is the one who has been receiving harassments after her personal information was exposed. Through my lawyer, all the slanderous posts on the review site were deleted. The uproar unexpectedly turned into a positive result as it cleared up the misunderstandings among my regular customers. Now the number of customers has returned to normal. While the incident did deter new customers, there were almost no regulars who left, even despite all the lies that Karen had been spreading. There's no doubt that it was pleasing to know that her claims weren't taken at face value. Moving forward, I aim to continue running the restaurant to meet the trust of my customers. Joanna, it's about Walton's memorial dinner, but I doubt anyone will show up. It's my wedding day, so everyone prefers a celebration. What do you mean? My Sael, Carolina, intentionally set her wedding date to coincide with the anniversary of our grandson's passing, a year after his death. Come on, Joanna, you've become so forgetful without Walton that you can't even understand English anymore. I was infuriated by Carolina's unapologetic demeanor. I was fed up with Carolina's manipulative words and actions, and my husband, Darren, seemed indifferent. Well, for me, seeing my sister in her wedding dress is more important, so you can go to the memorial dinner alone. Faced with Carolina and Darren's cold attitudes, I came up with a plan. All right, I'll consider what you said. Today, after 25 years as a housewife, Joanna, I saw a text from Darren and felt down again. Staying over there again? I muttered to myself. Darren works at his father's company and is so busy that he often stays at his family home near the company instead of our house. It was foolish of me to hope he might come home early today, since it's my birthday. I sighed while preparing an unusually lavish dinner. Maybe he's just really busy. I talked to the sky, trying to convince myself. Though we met through a friend's introduction, Darren has always prioritized his family home over me. I tried to dismiss the thought that my in-laws must have said something, prompted by Darren's frequent, "I'll be staying at my parents' house." I want to trust Darren, but even on the rare days he is home, we are invariably interrupted by calls from his sister, Carolina, summoning him frequently. Carolina, Darren's sister, is 17 years younger than him and, according to him, indescribably cute. Darren would always tell me, "I'll definitely spend my next day off with you and the kids," a promise that never materialized, making me feel like Carolina was disrupting our family life. As I was about to prepare dinner, my motivation drained, staring at a carrot when my son, Morris, called. "Mom? Happy birthday!" "Morris, thank you." Morris's casual words warmed my heart, and I struggled to hold back tears. "Mom, is it like that again today?" Morris, who married at 23 and now lives with his wife, Rothy, has known since childhood that Darren seldom comes home. Seeing me clearly downcast because Darren hasn't come home, Morris, who grew up witnessing this, still worries about me and calls, even now that he's grown. Especially today, on my birthday, when he learned Darren wouldn't be coming home again, Morris said with an unusually serious tone. "Mom, you must be feeling lonely without Dad, right?" "Yes, I am." "How about we come to live with you?" "What?" I was thrilled by Morris's suggestion, but worried that Rothy might not agree. I casually mentioned it to Rothy before, and she seemed happy about it. Morris, sensing my anxiety, responded with a clear and cheerful voice. "Really? Rothy's okay with it?" "Of course. She likes the food you make. She said she'd be happy to eat it every day." "Thank you. Then, I'll prepare your room and ask Dad if it's okay." I usually expected Darren to ignore this, but I felt like I received a birthday present from Morris, thinking he might listen this time. A ray of sunshine seemed to break through my gloom. Later, Morris and Rothy moved into our house. Even on the day they moved in, Darren didn't come home, but I was so happy they were here that I hardly minded. When I put effort into cooking, both Morris and, of course, Rothy were happy, making our meals always lively and enjoyable. Though Darren rarely came home, their presence meant I didn't feel lonely and enjoyed peaceful days. Then one day, Rothy felt unwell and decided to go to the hospital. It had been 4 months since they moved in with us, and she had never been seriously sick or injured before, so I was filled with anxiety. Morris's face, tense despite saying it'll be okay as he left for the hospital with Rothy, stuck in my mind. I tried to shake off the bad feeling by putting more energy into my chores than usual. However, my anxiety soon vanished. "Mom!" While I was hanging laundry on the balcony, Morris was coming home, waving at me with the biggest smile. "Welcome back, both of you. How did it go?" Rothy smiled and gave me a cute okay sign, gently stroking her belly. "Could it be?" "Yes. I'm pregnant." "Wow. Congratulations." I felt so full of warmth and joy, as if every cell in my body was trembling with happiness. Leaving the laundry halfway done, I went out to them. "Mom, you came out for us?" "Of course, I'm thrilled just thinking about our first grandchild. I was told it would be difficult for me to get pregnant, so I'm really happy." Rothy lovingly placed her hand on her belly. "Rothy, congratulations. Feel free to lean on me as much as you need." "Thank you." From that day on, it was a whirlwind of activity. We had to gather everything needed for Rothy and the baby, organize the house, and there was plenty to do. Darren would occasionally join me for shopping, but inevitably, if Carolina called, he'd make excuses and head back to his family home, no matter where we were. Rothy's belly grew noticeably, but 3 months before her due date, something went wrong. "Rothy, are you okay?" Morris called out desperately, but seeing Rothy in so much pain, he decided to call an ambulance. Soon after, the ambulance arrived, and Rothy was carried away on a stretcher. "I'll go with Rothy, so could you, Mom, come later, please?" "Of course, I'll gather what's needed and take a taxi." Morris nodded briefly, then got into the ambulance with Rothy, heading to the hospital. "I need to hurry, too." I packed a bag with essentials for Rothy's imminent birth. I'll call Dad, see if I can get the day off work. Darren, standing worried, said something unusual, indicating his concern. Really? You can do that? Yeah. It's an emergency with our first grandchild, no time to work. Darren quickly made the call and was easily excused. While Darren was on the phone, I arranged a taxi and locked up the house. We arrived at the hospital, and heading to Morris, we heard, Rothy will have a cesarean section. What should I do? I'm really anxious. If you're not strong, Morris, Rothy will feel your anxiety. You're right. I'm going to be a dad. How long had it been since Rothy entered the operating room? The red in surgery sign seemed to loom for hours. It's taking a long time. Darren started shaking his knees intensely, almost as if to say he took off work for this. Rothy is fighting hard. Yes, and if you look so worried, the baby will be startled when born. With a furrowed brow, Darren's irritation grew, and he silently went somewhere. He went to make a call. Yes. It was clear to us that despite taking time off to be here, Darren's frustration with the situation led him to call Carolina. As Morris and I grew increasingly anxious, Darren returned with a slightly relieved expression, glanced at the operating room, but sat down silently on the bench. Rothy! Morris murmured with a mix of worry and anxiety. I'm worried about Rothy and the baby. It's been so long. Yes, I didn't have a cesarean, so I'm not sure. It's worrying. In the heavy atmosphere, the operating room door finally opened, and the doctor came out. Sorry to keep you waiting. Both mother and child are safe. Great, my precious time was wasted. Darren complained but seemed concerned about the situation inside. Afterward, a nurse came out to speak with us. If you don't mind looking through the glass, you can see how they both are. Through the glass? At Morris's puzzled voice, the nurse made a complicated face and led us over. Beyond the guided glass, Rothy appeared to be sleeping exhaustedly. And as for the baby, it was connected to tubes, covered in some kind of case. That child is our first grandchild. Tears spilled from Darren's eyes, moved by the sight of the small baby fighting to live despite its frailty. Rothy and the baby are really okay, right? Morris desperately asked the nurse. Yes, but the baby weighs about 28 ounces and is very small, so it's in a critical situation needing to be connected to tubes for a while. The joy of the baby's birth was short-lived as Morris and I were shaken by a wave of anxiety. We have to send them all the strength we can. I forced a cheerful voice and placed my hands on Morris and Darren's backs. Yeah! Darren nodded with a troubled face and quietly left the hospital. Back home, Darren began rummaging through a drawer. The baby is a boy, right? Yes, that's right. What are you looking for? That thing. Finally finding what he was looking for, Darren looked pleased with himself. Now that the baby is born, we need to give him a name. You're naming him? Of course. He carries my blood. Darren spread out a notebook, with Morris standing silently beside him, resigned that his words would be futile. Darren, oblivious to Morris, was serious as he faced the notebook. He overcame a difficult birth. Let's name him Walton, hoping he leads a calm life. Darren, surprisingly serious about the name, slowly moved the pen across the paper. Looking at the notebook with Walton written on it, Darren said with satisfaction, How about that? It's a good name, isn't it? Yes, thank you. I was hopeful, seeing Darren's happy demeanor, that maybe he would start paying more attention to the family. However, there was one significant issue. Walton was too small to be discharged, and for a while, we were not allowed to meet him directly. Eventually, we were allowed to visit Rothy, so we went to tell her the baby's name. Rothy, how are you feeling? Dad named the baby. I'm okay. Thank you. What name did he choose? Rothy turned her head towards Darren with effort. Walton. It's a good name, isn't it? Darren proudly said, spreading out the notebook with Walton handwritten on it. What a beautiful name. I'm so happy. Thank you. Even as she spoke, Rothy seemed unusually downcast, her face shadowed with gloom. I thought maybe the hospital life had worn her out, and considered leaving her be, but her expression was so troubled I had to ask. Rothy, are you okay? You look so down. Joanna. Rothy looked at me with tears brimming in her eyes, and I knew something was wrong. There's something I need to tell also to Morris and Darren. Morris and Darren exchanged glances and then came closer to me. The thing is, we've been told Walton has a congenital disorder. What? No way. But a disorder doesn't have to mean something serious. Rothy, unable to hold back her tears any longer, trembled as she spoke. The thing is, it seems Walton doesn't have long to live. Not long to live. I unwittingly repeated Rothy's unexpected words. What do we do? A mix of fear and joy, sorrow, and happiness swirled together, creating a heavy atmosphere. Tears began to stream down Rothy's face as the tension broke. Rothy. Walton. Moved by the moment, Morris and I also began to cry, and eventually, we all cried until we had no tears left. After a good cry, Rothy, perhaps slightly toughened by becoming a mom, slowly began to speak. I want to create as many happy memories for Walton as possible. Yeah, let's spend every possible minute with Walton. Rothy, feeling a bit better, nodded and smiled. Half a year later, Rothy and Walton were discharged and came home. During that time, Darren stayed at his family home less than before, and we all prepared to welcome Rothy and Walton. We went out to places Rothy and Morris wanted to visit, adjusting to Rothy and Walton's health. Darren sometimes joined us, and other times he prioritized Carolina, but we focused on putting Walton first, thinking it was a bonus if Darren came along. Walton, who couldn't speak yet but whose expressions became increasingly lively, was adorable, and we showered him with love. After Walton could no longer travel, we spent time walking, sunbathing in the park, and he was adored by our neighbors. However, the joyful time flew by, and Walton passed away at just 3 years old. Rothy, looking at the sky as if to see her son again, murmured, Walton, it was short, but I enjoyed our time together. Morris, too, looked up at the sky, tears rolling down his cheeks. I was filled with sorrow and didn't think I could move on quickly, but Darren soon returned to prioritizing Carolina and decreased his visits home. The days seemed colorless, as if a hole had been punched in my heart. Though we had no regrets for being there for Walton till the end, the emptiness was heavy. As days swiftly passed, we were soon approaching Walton's memorial dinner. It's almost time for Walton's memorial dinner. Rothy spoke to Walton's photo with a prayer in her heart. We should share lots of memories of Walton. That's a great idea. We need to invite the neighbors who loved Walton. As we talked, Darren, unusually at home on his day off, joined the conversation. When is it? Well, Walton's anniversary is next month on the 14th, so that's our first choice if the venue is available. I see. After confirming, Darren got ready and left the house. We exchanged puzzled glances, but Darren didn't return that day. The next day, I was busy arranging the memorial dinner, securing the venue, and ordering what we needed. I was about to call relatives and acquaintances when Carolina called. Joanna? It's Walton's memorial dinner, but I doubt anyone will show up. It's my wedding day, so everyone prefers a celebration. What do you mean? Come on, Joanna, have you become so forgetful without Walton that you can't even understand English anymore? Carolina was clearly mocking me. So, I'm having my wedding on Walton's anniversary. How do you even know the date? I asked, trying to keep my cool. Obviously, bro told me. My anger rose at Carolina's unapologetic attitude. Why would you do that? Whether it's his wife or grandson, I don't care. It's punishment for taking my bro away from me. He always spoils me, Carolina said bluntly and hung up unilaterally. I was left dumbfounded, holding the phone for a while. Then, Morris and Rothy came in. Mom, you look upset. What happened? Snapped back to reality by Morris's words, I hesitated to tell them about Carolina. Is it about Dad again? Just as Morris asked, looking into my face, Darren came back home, right on cue. Feeling a sense of duty, I immediately called out to Darren. We need to talk right now. What? Can't I have a moment of peace? Ignoring Darren's complaints, I got straight to the point. Carolina's wedding is on the same day as Walton's memorial dinner. What? No way. In front of a surprised Morris and a confused Rothy, Darren responded indifferently. Yeah, seeing my sister in her wedding dress is more important, so you can go to the memorial dinner by yourself. Dad, are you serious? Don't you care about Walton at all? Morris trembled with anger, and Rothy started crying from shock. Quite bold words towards your father. Naturally, as her brother, I'd rather celebrate my cute Carolina than mourn a child who won't come back. Darren began saying outrageous things, but an idea crossed my mind, and I forced myself to suppress my emotions to intervene in their conversation. All right, I'll consider what you said. Morris and Rothy looked at me with their mouths agape as if their jaws would drop, but I nodded reassuringly, and they seemed to understand. On the day of the wedding, we arrived at the hotel venue. Since we had proceeded with the memorial dinner plans without Darren, he assumed he'd be the only one attending the wedding and sat with the bride's side. We were in mourning attire, standing out a bit, but we weren't breaking any wedding rules, so we remained dignified. Huh? Darren looked puzzled to see us. Actually, we wanted to see Carolina in her wedding dress too. We missed the invitation, so we asked your parents. Figures, right? Despite his words, Darren seemed satisfied, smiling contentedly. As the wedding began, Carolina, dressed in a pure white wedding gown, entered the venue and was surprised to see us. However, she couldn't interrupt the ceremony, especially in front of so many guests, and couldn't say anything, glaring at us in a way unbecoming of a bride throughout the ceremony. The ceremony ended peacefully, and we were there as the bride and groom and their families bid farewell to the attendees. As we were saying goodbye, a person recognized Morris and Rothy, your Walton's parents, aren't you? Dr. Trenton. The person who approached us was Walton's attending physician, who of course knew that today was Walton's anniversary. We really appreciated everything you did. Rothy, Morris, and I hugged Dr. Trenton. No, Walton was very brave until the end. It's been exactly a year today. Dr. Trenton hinted something, but we quickly understood what he meant. The groom, Robert, noticing the last attendees weren't moving, came over. What's going on, Trenton? Robert. Trenton looked troubled, glancing between Robert and us. Do you two know each other? Yes. Robert is a junior colleague of mine. Trenton scratched his cheek, looking unsure of what to do. I've been wondering, what is your relationship with Carolina? Robert asked us, puzzled why we were sitting on the bride's side despite it being our first meeting and our mourning attire. Carolina is my husband's sister, and this is my son, Morris, and his wife, Rothy. I see. And how did you come to know Trenton? Robert asked with genuine curiosity. Actually, we had a child with a congenital disorder. Dr. Trenton took care of him. Rothy answered, and Trenton nodded solemnly. Walton, our child, passed away last year and went to heaven. I'm sorry to hear that. Today is Walton's anniversary, isn't it? Such an important day coincided. I answered clearly, thinking Trenton's point was very valid. The bride chose this day for her wedding, knowing it was Walton's anniversary. Carolina insisted on this day, saying she wanted it no matter what. Was that on purpose? She said she loved children. Robert looked incredulous, and after conveying something to Carolina and Darren, who were happily chatting, Carolina and Darren approached us with Robert. What's this? I was just getting compliments from Bro on how beautiful I look. Carolina snapped at Robert, oblivious to the tense atmosphere between us. You insisted on having the wedding today, right? And you said you loved children. Yet, you knew it was Joanna's grandson's anniversary and still chose this day? Carolina's face went pale, but she desperately tried to cover up. I didn't know such a thing. It must be a coincidence, or you're lying. Carolina's behavior was suspicious. Darren nodded along, but Robert, faced with Trenton's inner denial, clenched his lips and raised his voice. Is that what a person does? Don't you know what's important? I'll have to reconsider the marriage. At Robert's declaration, Carolina's complexion grew even paler, and she started to rant as her lie was exposed. Why are you even here? It's all your fault. Weren't you supposed to be lonely at your memorial dinner? Carolina approached me with such force that I thought she might grab me, and continued her tirade. I'm the happy bride. It's absurd for you gloomy people to be here uninvited. Her loud voice echoed through the spacious venue, attracting the attention of Carolina and Darren's father, Owen, and mother, Teresa, who hurried over. I was the one who let Joanna and her family in. It was an apology for my foolish daughter and son's behavior that I asked them to attend. Dad, why would you do that? That's too much. Carolina screamed, her fury unabated. If you don't understand why, then we're done with you. Darren too. What? What did I do? I haven't done anything wrong, right? And why am I being disowned? Owen, realizing his children were heartless like cyborgs, sighed deeply. You've always said you wanted to live on your own. Reset everything and start over as a new individual. Facing abandonment by their own father, Darren and Carolina lost the will to argue and fell to their knees. Unknown to many, the hotel where Carolina had her wedding was the same one Joanna and her family had visited for memorable trips with Walton. I had informed the hotel from the planning stages and had first explained the situation to Owen. With Owen's understanding and cooperation, after Carolina's wedding, we invited acquaintances to the same place for a memorial dinner, making it possible to attend both the wedding and the memorial dinner. When I explained to Owen, I was anxious about whether he would believe me, but Owen and the relatives were already disappointed with Carolina's behavior and Darren's patheticness, and they willingly helped. Afterward, Carolina divorced, and soon my divorce with Darren was finalized, and Darren left the house. Having cut ties with Owen, both lost their jobs and homes, and I'm not sure how they're managing now while paying compensation from the divorce trial. Considering the hurt they caused not only to Walton but also to Morris and Rothy, and their abusive words and past actions, I honestly feel they got what they deserved. Morris, Rothy, and I, watched over by Walton's smiling face, have come to live peacefully as if the storm had passed. And with the bad ties cut off, good fortune came our way. Mom! Today, Rothy, who felt something odd in her stomach and went to the hospital with Morris, returned home with beaming smiles. Actually, we're expecting our second baby. With my hands raised in joy, Morris and Rothy exchanged deeply moved glances. Soon, Walton will have a little brother. From now on, this car belongs to me and her. Despite being caught cheating, husband Andy spoke with pride. It was utterly baffling to see him like that. How could he be so cheerful, act so superior towards me? It felt like we were living in completely different worlds. But if he's happy to take the car, I couldn't be happier. The monthly loan is $3,000, though. He'll figure something out. Okay, I wonder if he's okay with the $3,000 loan. When I accepted Andy's request with a nod, he started smiling in a way I had never seen before. My name is Samantha. I'm 38 and work at a design company. I thought I was living a happy life without any particular worries in my job or personal life. But occasionally, I find myself pondering one thing. When will I ever get married? At nearly 40, I don't even have a boyfriend, let alone married. My dating experience is limited. Before I knew it, all my friends were married, leaving me feeling left behind. There were times I thought about giving up on marriage, but seeing my friends happy made me dream about it again. My life changed significantly one day after work. Feeling good, I decided to go for a drink alone at a pub. Entering a bar I noticed, I ordered some drinks and appetizers. While waiting and looking at my phone, I noticed a man approaching me. "Lady, are you alone?" A man came over and peered at my face. This was the beginning of my encounter with Andy, who would later become my husband. "Well, yes, I'm alone." "Really? Then let's drink together. Shall we?" Without waiting for my response, he sat down in front of me and tilted his glass. "Wait a minute." "Come on, it'll be just for a bit." "Just for a bit, then." With that thought, I accepted him. But I didn't have the energy to talk to anyone else at that day. As I looked down, he started talking on his own. Eventually, we exchanged numbers and parted ways. I thought our relationship was over, but 2 months after we first met, I and Andy had become close, meeting frequently. As we exchanged contacts, I found myself gradually drawn to him. Talking to him, my feelings would calm without notice. I sincerely wanted to talk more. When he said he wanted to see me, I genuinely felt happy. Surprisingly, I never imagined I could harbor such feelings, leaving me astonished. And then, about 6 months after we first met, we became a couple. After 3 years of dating, we got married. I never thought I could get married, so when he proposed, it felt like a dream. But I realized it was the peak of happiness only after everything ended. After marriage, he changed drastically. It made me wonder if his personality during our dating was a lie. About a month into our life together, he suddenly became distant. No matter what I asked, whether he would be late coming home, or what he wanted for dinner, he would just respond with, yeah." A disinterested reply. "Hey, what's wrong lately? You seem down. Leave me alone." "It's none of your business." I wondered if he had come to dislike me. Seeing his attitude worsen day by day, my anxiety grew. Still, I was happy he came home. He would eat the dinner I made, and we still shared a bedroom. Somewhere in my mind, I believed he still had feelings for me. Maybe his current cold and harsh attitude was because he was tired. That's what I thought. However, a month into our diverging lives, the reasons of overtime and drinking parties made he come home late increasingly, and I found myself spending more time alone at home. I wasn't alone from morning to evening due to work, but coming home to no one was indescribably empty. Alone again today. Looking at his messages, he said he had overtime again today. I was still thankful for the messages, but the increase in overtime and drinking parties right after getting married bothered me. Maybe I did something wrong. Disillusioned, perhaps he intentionally started avoiding coming home. I quietly placed the shopping bag down as I received a message from him. Gradually, he stopped coming home daily. We rented the slightly expensive rental property to start our new life together. Since he stopped coming home, it had become a place where I spent my time alone, feeling lonely. We were supposed to be married, so why did it come to this? As I thought about him, I continued to eat dinner alone. Andy, when he occasionally came home, was always in a bad mood. "Dinner's ready, you'll eat, right? I'll start making it now." I prepared dinner as usual and served it to him. However, after tasting a bite of the side dish, he stopped eating. "What's wrong? Not hungry?" "I've thought this before, but the food you make is really terrible." I was stunned by the words said to me for the first time. Until now, he had said it was delicious and had seconds many times. He used to say that he wanted to eat my dishes rather than fine dining restaurants, even a special day like an anniversary. But why suddenly? Sorry. I didn't know it was bad. I'll clean it up." "Don't touch it." He glared at me sharply and started eating again. But he didn't look like he was enjoying it, his face always crumpled. He started to complain about the cleaning and laundry I did. The coffee cups weren't aligned, a picture hanging was tilted. Even a single hair on the floor was enough for him to complain. I work too, so some imperfections should be expected. I began to wonder if it's normal to fuss over such minor things. Of course, I've mentioned several times that I can't do housework perfectly because of work. But he wouldn't budge. In the end, it always concluded, "Just shut up and do as I say." With him yelling. Sigh. The stress piled up each time I interacted with him. I started to doubt whether marrying him was the right decision. Various emotions swirled, and I even considered divorce. But the fact that I got married at this age, and thinking about the hassle of divorce proceedings, I couldn't bring myself to act. I thought I just had to endure it. Such thoughts had developed over time. But before we got married, I made a significant purchase. It was a luxury car from a well-known brand. Of course, I couldn't pay in full, so I took out a loan. I wasn't particularly into cars, but there was one model I had always dreamed of. I was happy to have it as an adult, and it motivated me at work. I drove it to work and received compliments from car-loving colleagues. Initially, Andy praised the car. "That's amazing. Good for you." That's what he said. But as his attitude changed, he began using the car without asking. It was inconvenient because I needed the car for work and shopping. It would have been acceptable if he didn't have a car, but he did. Yet, he preferred mine, which bothered me. Because of this, I had to use the bus for work and walk for shopping. I've addressed this issue with him. "Hey, could you stop using my car without asking? I need it too." "Come on, it doesn't matter." "It does matter to me." "Well, I don't care about you. You're managing with the bus, right? That's fine. I have reasons to use a car. Don't butt in. Even though you have your own car? Your car is better. Just let me do it." He never listened and would end the conversation unilaterally. The bus fare added up, and walking home from the bus stop was exhausting after a long day at work. Shopping became more frequent since I couldn't carry heavy bags without the car, going from once a week to every other day. I considered borrowing his car. I asked, knowing it was a long shot. "That car is mine. There's no way you could handle it. Keep your jokes to a limit." I thought having two cars was unnecessary, but held back from saying anything to avoid angering him. But I couldn't just use it without permission. Slight change in the car's parking spot, seat, or steering wheel position would surely infuriate him. That's how he is, so it would be troublesome either way. If I were younger, I might have argued. But I no longer have the energy for that. Andy continued to not come home. He claimed he wasn't drinking because he was driving, but I noticed the scent of a perfume I didn't recognize. It wasn't long before I started suspecting he was having an affair. I had a hunch since the increase in his overtime and drinking outings. But I had neither solid evidence nor the money to hire a detective. I silently acknowledged his infidelity. He probably thinks I'm too dumb to notice his infidelity, believing he can do whatever because I'll just go along with anything. That must be what he's thinking. The marriage I had imagined was far too different from reality. I dreamed of a warmer, kinder relationship where we cared for each other, going on little trips on weekends, enjoying tourist spots. I dreamed of such a family. I thought I could achieve that with Andy, but it was impossible. It feels like this will be my life forever. I sighed and began preparing dinner for one. But then, one day, something happened that changed everything. It was on a day I came home late from overtime. I usually let Andy know when I'll be working late. I did that day too, but I finished earlier than expected and came home. No reply from him. Probably, he wouldn't be home again today. Feeling down, I walked home, but something was different when I arrived. My car was there. Usually, he used to use my car, so only his car was supposed to be parked. It was unusual. Thinking this, I went to enter the house. But then I saw it. The car was slightly shaking. I should have just been inside the house, but I approached the car out of curiosity. I could hear voices inside. Andy and a woman's voice. I moved closer to hear the conversation. "Do you love me, Belle?" "Yes. I do." The woman's name seemed to be Belle. Listening in, I heard a conversation I had expected but wished not to hear. "I want to divorce soon. I want to marry Belle. I'm happy. How have things been with your wife lately?" "We don't talk. I don't want to. Why did I even marry her? I'm always with Belle, so there's no real conversation, right?" "That makes sense." I felt ridiculed. My heart ached, and I felt indescribably sad. I didn't want to hear any more. I quietly stood up and was about to enter the house when my bag hit the car and made a noise. Too late, I realized my mistake. Andy peeked out from the driver's seat, seeing me.
"Ah. You. Why are you here?"
Well,
You let your wife hear this. This is the worst."
Andy got out and confronted me.
"You said you had overtime today, right? Why are you back so early? Overtime means later, right? Did you lie to me?"
I didn't lie. I really had overtime. But it seems like, whenever I say I have overtime, you do this? I hoped he would falter at my accusation, but having been caught with Belle, he seemed resigned.
"Yeah. So what? Is it so bad?"
"It is bad. We're married, you know. What you're doing is cheating. And, how dare you use my car to see another woman?"
"So what? I'm using it now."
Andy showed no remorse. Then he said something astonishing.
"This car is now ours."
I was speechless. My saying my car probably prompted his bold statement. But then, something inside me broke. I'd gladly hand over the car, including its loan. Okay, the loan is $3,000 a month though, hope that's okay. I was paying a $3,000 monthly loan. It was a bit of a stretch, but I thought I could manage with my current income. Paying the loan for the car which he was using seemed absurd. "But you'll have to pay the loan."
"What? Why? You keep paying it."
"Why don't you want to pay? Can't afford it? With your own car and rent, you can't, can you?" Provoking him, he became even angrier.
"What do you mean I can't afford it?" "Fine, I'll pay."
He was probably underestimating the amount because I had been paying it. Later, I transferred the loan and ownership of the car to Andy. During the loan process, I was handed a document detailing the loan by the agent, but there was no particular surprise at the amount mentioned. Whether Andy could really afford the $3,000 or had not thoroughly reviewed the document was unclear. He seemed solely focused on finishing the procedure quickly. After the procedure was completed, the process moved on to divorce. This time, due to infidelity, I hired the lawyer and chose a collaborative divorce. I told the lawyer about submitting the dashcam footage from the day the affair was discovered, seeking divorce and compensation. The lawyer gladly took on the case, and after weeks of preparation, the day to settle things with Andy finally arrived. Andy was visibly angry, and Belle was sitting next to him, looking defiant. Despite being told multiple times that hiring a lawyer was overkill, I couldn't disagree more. As the discussion progressed, it was revealed how they met and who Belle was in the first place. Apparently, she is the daughter of an executive at the company where Andy works. She also worked in the same company, same department, and they were acquainted. Of course, Andy knew she was the executive's daughter when they became involved. While he was at fault for initiating, she, knowing he was married and still engaging, was also to blame. I demanded a divorce and compensation from Andy. He said, perhaps out of stubbornness.
Compensation. Divorce. Do as you like. I can pay whatever compensation you want.
However, Belle seemed desperate not to have Andy pay the compensation.
If you pays the compensation, it'll reduce the money I can spend.
What a way of thinking. It seemed she was planning to marry Andy after our divorce.
Are you okay with your family and company finding out about this? Huh? Do whatever you want.
Belle must think my words are merely a threat. Well, if she says to do as I please, then so be it. Since Andy and I both intended to divorce, it was finalized that day. Andy agreed to pay the compensation, and we dissolved the marriage. Of course, Andy and Belle's relationship was later exposed to her company. After the divorce, I moved to a house near my workplace and continued to live comfortably. No need to accommodate anyone. No need to worry about the car loan. What a wonderful life. I wonder if I could have continued this lifestyle if I hadn't been married. I must admit, I've regretted it at times. Perhaps because I now have more financial freedom, coworkers have mentioned that I look healthier. I plan to live quietly on my own, with the compensation and my income. I won't marry again. From now on, I will live a life of my own. That's what I've decided. However, about 3 months after the divorce, suddenly, I received a call from Andy. What could he possibly want now? Though I found it annoying, I answered the phone. Hello, yes?
Hey! It's not hello. What's going on? What's this about a red envelope?
A red envelope? Perhaps it was a reminder or a demand notice. Calm down. What do you want?
Like I said, what's this about the red envelope? When I opened it, it said I need to pay for the car loan. And, wait, were you paying $3,000 a month? I didn't know about that.
Not know?
I should have mentioned the amount when we transferred the loan and ownership.
It's strange you didn't know. What?
You didn't look at the amount because I was paying it effortlessly? You can't expect me to have thought it was $3,000. Hey! Can't you change it back so you're paying it now?
Such a convenient man. After all, Andy would be the one using the car, even if I paid for it. And now that we're divorced, I shouldn't have to listen to him. It's impossible.
Remember, you were the one who started saying the car was yours in the first place? Do you really think you can come now and demand I pay for the car, expecting it to be that easy? Don't say that. We were married, right? Even though we're divorced, we were in love, weren't we? Can't you help me out when I'm in trouble?
In love. Help out in trouble. What is he talking about? I understand we were married, hence in love. But I've been through a lot because of Andy. And now, asking for help just because he's in trouble is too convenient. You.
After living however you wanted, coming to me, now a stranger since we're divorced, for help is too convenient, isn't it? Now that the reminder has arrived, you better figure out how to pay it soon.
Figure it out. That's impossible.
No, don't start with that now. You are the one who said you'd pay my car loan in a fit of bravado, remember? Maybe you should learn to take responsibility for your words? That's that.
Hey!
Andy was making a fuss on the other end, but I had nothing more to say to him. I hung up without a second thought, ignoring him. The phone rang about 10 more times after that, but of course, I didn't answer. After leaving my phone aside, he seemed to give up as it eventually stopped ringing, with no further calls thereafter. Half a year later, I was still living comfortably by myself. Thanks to moving closer to work, the commute was incredibly easy. Having more personal time and finding a new hobby of going to art galleries was a joy. On such a pleasant day off, relaxing on the sofa, my mobile phone rang. Looking at the caller ID, Andy's name was displayed. Why was he calling again, I wondered. Tentatively, I answered the phone, and he began speaking in a tone as if his previous bravado was a lie. Samantha. It's me. Andy. What's going on? Despite his apparent weakness, I couldn't coddle him. I asked what he wanted with a tone of detachment. The compensation. I can't pay it anymore. Please, give me a break. Excuse me? Give you a break? His plea irritated me, but I was curious about what had happened, so I listened. Apparently, he had been hiding it out of pride, but after our divorce, he had to leave his job. The reason was his indecent act with Belle, the executive's daughter. It seems he was pushed to resign voluntarily for disrupting the company's order. Belle had dumped him as well. Even though he tried to find a new job, he struggled, surviving on part-time jobs. However, that kind of life didn't last long. Now he has sold both cars and moved out of his rental, returning to his parents' home. He probably thought this would make his life a bit easier. However, a few weeks after moving back home, his mother's health deteriorated, requiring care. With his father being elderly, Andy had no choice but to take on the caregiving duties while also working. Moreover, just because he sold the cars doesn't mean he's free from paying for them. The luxury car loans, the compensation to me. Andy is evidently struggling. Come on, please. I'm begging you. Heck, I'd even consider getting back together if it'd make things easier for you. What do you say? Where exactly would I find it easier? Without much thought, getting back with Andy now would mean taking on the responsibilities of his parents' care, the loan payments, and other living expenses. He would likely quit his job and leave all the housework to me, as before. Life was hard enough when we were together. Jumping back into an even more difficult situation is unthinkable. I've said something similar before, but you truly only think about yourself. You probably just want to live in my house and have an easy life, right? That's not it. I can't believe that. Do you have any idea how much trouble you've caused me? Caring for parents is tough, you say? Forced to quit your job? Dumped by your girlfriend? All of that wouldn't have happened if you hadn't cheated, right? Andy fell silent. But I continued to press him. I wonder why I ever married someone like you. I'd be angry with my past self if I could. Don't marry Andy, you won't be happy, and you're still talking about getting back together? That's a bit crazy. If you were truly remorseful, such words wouldn't come to you. So, I expect you to continue paying the compensation. That's... Please. Begging someone you once looked down on must be humiliating. No matter how much you beg, I won't listen. So, don't contact me ever again. Hey! Samantha! I hung up the phone. After that, Andy seemed to have given up, as I received no further contact from him. No messages, nothing. The desperation was clear from that call, but listening to his condescending tone, I wondered if he still thought he wasn't at fault, pondering why this was happening to him. Well, the compensation has continued to be deposited after that last call, so he must be managing somehow. Half a year after Andy's last attempt to contact me, I continue to live a comfortable life on my own.
I've kept up with my new hobby of visiting art museums. My room is now filled with art books and postcards purchased from museum shops. Lately, I've been thinking about visiting art museums abroad. There's a lot I ponder about married life, and even if I were to be reborn, I doubt I'd want to marry. Honestly, I see no good in getting married. For now, I'm just thankful for this comfortable life I can enjoy on my own.
I'm selling this house because I'm moving in with my girlfriend.
Dad, who betrayed Mom, further hurt her. This house was in Dad's name, but Mom had contributed a significant amount of money to build it, and she loved this house. Yet, Dad decided to claim everything for himself without considering Mom's feelings. Now, 12 years after my parents' divorce, I've come to understand things I couldn't back then and decided to take revenge on Dad. I couldn't forgive Dad for living comfortably after hurting Mom, who had struggled to raise me.
Does your company condone affairs?
That's what I told them during my interview at Dad's company. My name is Chloe. I'm a 21-year-old senior in college, currently job hunting. When I was in 4th grade, my parents divorced, and we moved to Mom's parents' house, which meant changing schools and my entire environment, which led to some mental instability. I wasn't very sociable, so making friends was hard. Being a child of divorce, I was often left out, and I didn't have the courage to initiate conversations. For the 2 years from the transfer until graduating elementary school, I had no close friends and felt isolated, often getting sad remembering friends from my previous school. Moreover, Mom was working all day, so our time together decreased, and I spent more time with my grandparents. My grandparents were caring, but having always been with my parents, I found it hard to open up to them. However, things settled down when I started middle school. There were many students from different elementary schools, so I finally met people who didn't prejudge me for my parents' divorce. I made friends and slowly started to become happier, leaving behind my constant sadness. Determined not to burden Mom, I focused more on my studies. I got a scholarship that covered tuition for college, leading to a busy life filled with studies and part-time work. I wanted to make Mom's life peaceful and happy, so even in my busy life, I felt fulfilled. I've become more sociable than before, but the trauma from my past still lingers. Until 4th grade, when my parents divorced, I lived a normal life with both Mom and Dad. I was a shy child, so even though I had friends, I mostly spent weekends with my family. I think I was a child who loved my parents dearly. We used to have family meals together every morning and evening, and after dinner, we'd spend time together as a family. But then Dad started coming home late from work, and there were nights he wouldn't return before I went to bed. Dad was already in a managerial position then, and Mom told me he couldn't come home because of the responsibilities and overtime. Even though I felt lonely, I understood that it was Dad's job that provided for our current lifestyle. So I hoped Dad would be able to finish work earlier. This routine continued until one night, I woke up and heard my parents arguing. This was something that had never happened before, and curiosity overcame my anxiety. I cautiously approached to see what was happening. Dad, angry and carrying his belongings, stormed out of the living room.
Enough! I'd rather be with my girlfriend than you. We're getting a divorce.
Mom started crying at his words, but Dad ignored her and headed for the front door.
Dad!
Knowing what divorce meant, I feared I'd never see Dad again, so I ran after him and clung to him, hoping the kind Dad who used to play with me would stop.
Get out of my way!
But Dad, who had never been rough with me before, glanced at me coldly and shook me off without hesitation. Thrown harshly, I rolled down the hallway, bruising myself. I burst into tears from the shock of Dad's anger and being pushed away. And the pain made the reality even harder to bear. Confused about why Dad suddenly became cold towards me, I couldn't stop crying. Mom hugged me while I cried, but Dad left the house without looking back, even though I was crying. Seeing Dad leave like that, I felt abandoned and cried even harder. This incident made me afraid to trust anyone but Mom for a while, and I think it made me even more introverted. Dad never returned after that, and we continued living in the house, but a few days later, he came back. I briefly hoped we could be a family again, but that hope was quickly shattered.
I'm selling this house because I'm moving in with my girlfriend. Get out.
Dad showed Mom some documents. I remember this house being built when I was in first grade. Mom was delighted to have our own home. I was sure they had built it together. So Mom protested Dad selling the house on his own, but since it was in his name, she had to give up. Thus, Mom and I were forced to move to her parents' house. As a child, I was not privy to the dealings between Mom and Dad that followed. However, I often wondered why Mom worked so hard, even though she probably should be receiving compensation and child support. I assumed part of her effort was for my sake, but I thought we would have more financial leeway if Dad had been paying child support. Curious, I asked my grandparents about it during high school. I thought Mom wouldn't want to tell me, and it must have been a painful topic for her too, so I couldn't ask her. According to my grandparents, it seemed Dad had fled without paying any alimony or child support. Mom had contacted him numerous times about the missing payments, but after he became unreachable, she decided to prioritize our future and let it go. As I suspected, their divorce was due to Dad's infidelity, confirming that he had betrayed our family. Hearing this from my grandparents, I understood why Mom worked so hard and felt a surge of anger towards Dad. Mom, it seemed, had given up pursuing Dad further and hadn't even tried to find his address to urge him to pay for alimony or child support. Though I was angry with Dad, who didn't seem to have much remorse, my desire to ease Mom's burdens quickly overshadowed it. I wanted to make sure Mom, who always prioritizes me over herself and is busy from morning till night, could have some time to relax. I've always thought that Mom should take more care of herself. Using my anger towards Dad as motivation, I doubled down on my studies, aiming to land a good job to assist Mom. The thought of Dad living carefree was frustrating, but I tried not to dwell on it, focusing instead on our current life, just like Mom. As a university student beginning to think about job hunting, I was organizing our storage to create a better resume. I hoped to recall past experiences for my self-promotion. While sorting through storage, I found letters from friends before I transferred schools in elementary, immersing myself in memories. Then, I came across an unfamiliar box. Curious, I opened it and found it contained documents from an investigation into Dad's infidelity. I was shocked to find these hidden away. Though I had tried to stop thinking about Dad, I still wanted to know what had happened between my parents. Compelled, I began to read the documents. As I read the story in more detail than what I heard from my grandparents, my desire for revenge against Dad grew. My grandparents probably had chosen their words carefully or didn't know the full extent. Reading further, I realized Dad had done worse things than I had imagined. He had been unfaithful for longer than I thought, and it seemed he hadn't even tried to hide his late nights from Mom. His affair was with a woman 6 years his junior, who had had a difficult life herself. After a car accident left her mom dead, she had been working since she was a student because her dad had after effects. Despite having a more challenging life than mine, how could she not feel remorse for destroying a family? In the evidence photos of the affair, the woman walking arm in arm with Dad was visibly pregnant. I couldn't help feeling disgusted seeing the two of them looking so content together. To anyone unaware, they would seem like a happy couple. Yet in reality, they were two people who didn't care about the misery they brought upon Mom and me. I had tried not to dwell on my anger towards Dad, but seeing this, it was impossible. I felt an overwhelming urge to make them suffer, but I managed to hold back. I thought about how Mom would be saddened if anything happened to me and about the potential future of their child, who must be around middle school age by now, 12 years after the divorce. I couldn't forgive Dad and his mistress, but acting on my emotions would only harm their child, causing them the same pain I endured. I didn't want to stoop to Dad's level, and that thought stopped me. However, the anger was too strong to ignore. A few days later, on a weekend, I decided to visit the house mentioned in the investigation report. I doubted they would still be there after all this time, but I needed to check. Upon arrival, I found the house no longer existed, which left me with mixed feelings of disappointment and relief. I had wanted to confront Dad about his affair and ask about Mom, but the thought of actually meeting him was nerve-wracking. As I was walking away, convinced I would never meet him and that I should forget him, I noticed a nameplate with Dad's name. I stopped, startled. Trying to convince myself it was probably someone else, curiosity led me to observe the house more closely. It was a spacious family home with a play area for children. Being a weekend, I could faintly hear children's voices. If Dad had remarried his mistress after the divorce, it wouldn't be strange if they had a family. The thought was suffocating, and as I watched the front door open and children come out, I moved to a spot farther away to continue observing. Then, the parents followed, and despite looking older than in the photos, I recognized them as Dad and his mistress. Dad had built a happy family with his mistress without paying us any compensation or child support. While Mom struggled, Dad lived comfortably. Filled with anger, I clenched my fists. After watching them leave happily as a family, I headed straight to a detective agency and requested an investigation into Dad's family. I used all my savings and part-time job earnings for this. When I later received the investigation results, it confirmed that Dad had been living well after the divorce, with 3 children. While Mom and I struggled, Dad lived comfortably without facing any consequences for his affair, a fact that left me bitter. I realized I harbored not just anger but also resentment towards Dad and his mistress, who lived carefree after abandoning Mom and me. I wanted them to experience the same pain and hardship that Mom and I went through. However, recognizing that even though they were the worst, their children were innocent, I wanted to speak with them at least once, more for my peace of mind than for revenge. So, calming myself for a composed conversation, I decided to visit after school. Dad would be at work and the kids at school, leaving his housewife mistress, Abigail, at home. What was she thinking, having an affair with a married man and now living happily with him? With questions and things I wanted to say, I went to their house on a day school ended in the morning and rang the doorbell. As expected, Abigail answered. "Yes, how can I help you?" Her normal response irritated me, and I blurted out, "How can you live normally after stealing Dad from Mom and me and breaking up our family?" It seemed I wasn't as calm as I thought, speaking sharply without realizing. "What? What are you talking about?" She seemed quite dubious, possibly on guard because of the sudden question. Perhaps for her, an affair was something that could be easily forgotten. This thought made my chest tighten. Amazed at how she could pretend not to know, I explained everything about my relationship with Dad and what happened 12 years ago. I broke into tears recalling the past, but once I finished, I looked at her for a reaction. The truth I learned then solidified my resolve for revenge. Some time later, I went for a job interview. With good grades and active involvement in various activities, I had many strong points. I usually passed the document screening without issues, and this time, as I faced the interviewers, it seemed like I had already left a favorable impression again. 3 interviewers questioned me while reviewing my documents. Thanks to my preparation, I answered smoothly, and the interviewer's cheerful expression and impressed attitude made me feel quite confident. At the end, when they said I could ask any questions I had, I decided to ask something I had been wanting to know. Does your company condone affairs? What actions would be taken if an affair occurs? My question surprised the interviewers, leaving them momentarily speechless. After a pause, they said they hadn't encountered such a situation but would probably impose some penalty. And when asked why I was inquiring about this, I explained the whole situation. My father, who abandoned my mother through infidelity, works here and is currently having an affair within the company. One interviewer, visibly upset, slammed the table and stood up angrily. Are you joking? How dare you come here and lie in such a manner? This is outrageous. I immediately retorted. Please don't shout just because I hit a nerve, Dad. I had actually known that Dad worked in this company and that he was involved in interviews as personnel. Therefore, I purposely attended this interview to expose Dad's actions. There were many interviewees, and it wasn't certain Dad would be the interviewer, but I thought damaging his reputation would be enough. His aggressive response to my presence added credibility to my story, and I felt a sense of satisfaction. Initially, Dad didn't seem to recognize me, but he became unsettled after reading my documents. He didn't remember my face, but my name and educational background must have made him realize I was the daughter of his ex-wife. He seemed relieved when I showed no reaction to seeing him, thinking I hadn't recognized him. I calmly retorted to Dad's anger. "It's a fact that you cheated on Mom and are now in an affair with a younger woman in this company, right? I'm just stating the truth." The investigation I had commissioned revealed not only about Dad's post-divorce family but also his infidelity. Apparently, Dad was quite the philanderer, having 3 kids and still fooling around. He was having an affair with a younger female colleague, and there were photos of them looking happy together, leaving no room for denial.
Is this some kind of harassment? Do you think you can get away with this?
Dad accused me of lying and tried to blame me. He had been successful in hiding his actions so far and was desperate not to be punished. Smirking, I continued. "It's the truth, isn't it?" I wanted to know what the company thinks about having such a person in a responsible position. Dad wanted to make me look bad, but that wasn't going to happen. The other 2 interviewers, having witnessed our exchange, looked displeased. I showed them the final piece of evidence. "By the way, this is the report on Dad's infidelity. I trust you will review it and take appropriate action." Dad tried to dismiss what I said in a panic, but I handed the investigation report to the other interviewers, asking them to address the affair. Dad tried to grab me, but I dodged and delivered my final blow. "Abigail knows about this and is coming to the office today." I had told Abigail about Dad's affair, and in her anger, she had planned to confront him publicly. So before leaving the interview room, I declared to Dad that he had no escape.
"You told her? When did you even meet her?"
Dad, shocked and not expecting I knew Abigail, froze. Ignoring him, I left the room. Dad's yelling could still be heard after I closed the door, drawing stares from other interviewees. Normally, the atmosphere would feel uncomfortable, but knowing that I had derailed Dad's smooth life brought me a sense of relief. Originally, I came to this company solely for revenge against Dad, so failing the interview was not a concern. Having finished my task, I was walking down the hallway when I heard footsteps running up from behind. Turning around, I saw Dad, his face red with anger, charging at me to throw a punch. Surprised, I managed to dodge and avoided injury, but I stumbled and fell. Looking down at me, Dad shouted angrily,
"What have you done? If it weren't for you..."
As Dad tried to hit me again, I braced myself, unable to evade, and covered my head with my arms, preparing for the impact. However, before he could strike, Dad froze.
"What are you doing to Chloe? And what's this about an affair? You told me you were single, but you've been deceiving me."
Abigail had arrived, startling Dad. She swung her bag at Dad, who was ready to strike me, hitting and shielding me from him.
"Abigail, it's not what you think."
Dad panicked at Abigail's arrival, but as Abigail, angered and feeling deceived, started to confront him, they began to argue. Abigail, while shouting in anger, hit Dad with her bag, causing a major commotion. It turned out that when I confronted Abigail about the affair, she was unaware that Dad was married.
"I'm sorry, even if I didn't know. You must have suffered a lot. I will definitely make it up to you. I'm truly sorry."
She apologized tearfully. Further conversation revealed that she met Dad through work, and he had been helping her as a struggling motherless child. Dad had hidden his marital status, and they eventually started dating. Abigail had been working right after graduating high school in order to live with her father, who suffered from the after effects of an accident, which also took away her mother. It was natural to develop feelings for Dad, who had helped her. I had thought the mistress would be a terrible person, but Abigail was another victim of Dad. Apparently, Mom had never asked Abigail for compensation or even contacted her, and until now, Abigail was unaware of Dad's misdeeds. I wondered why Mom hadn't pursued compensation from Abigail, but then remembered she was pregnant at the time. Perhaps Mom didn't want to burden a pregnant woman, even if she was the mistress. Thinking this as I watched Abigail tearfully apologize, I realized she wasn't the villain I had thought her to be. She didn't look like she was trying to deceive me. So, I told her about Dad's current affair with a coworker. The investigation report included evidence of Dad's ongoing infidelity. I thought that Abigail, being a victim herself, deserved to know about Dad's current actions. When I showed her the documents, she became furiously angry at Dad. He lied about being single, married me, and now this? What kind of person is he? I will never forgive him. Her anger towards Dad, the betrayer, ran deep, and together we decided to take revenge on him. Originally, I had applied to Dad's company and was already scheduled for a second-round interview. So, on the day of the interview, Abigail and I had planned to go to the company and publicly denounce Dad. The two caused quite a scene in the company hallway, with other male employees restraining Dad and security arriving. I took Abigail's hand and led her out of the company after the commotion. Many people had gathered around due to the noise. Among them, I spotted the woman from the investigation photos, hiding in the shadows with a petrified look on her face. My revenge was complete by exposing Dad's misdeeds, which had been hidden until now. Subsequently, Dad, who was on the verge of becoming a department head, got demoted to a regular employee due to the affair. Since most of the situation became known during the chaos in the hallway, he seems to be working with a sense of humility. He used to have a reputation as a family-oriented and capable supervisor, but when Dad's bad deeds became known within the company, he was branded the worst man and was treated coldly. The woman Dad had an affair with apparently quietly resigned from the company. Additionally, Abigail demanded compensation and child support from Dad and informed him of her intention to divorce. With the company's cooperation, Dad couldn't escape paying. During the divorce mediation, Abigail discovered that Dad had not paid any compensation or child support to my mom, and also learned of his gambling habits in addition to spending money for his lover. Though he claimed it was occasional, he had been deceitfully spending family savings on gambling. Abigail, further enraged by these revelations, successfully demanded a higher amount of compensation and child support from Dad. Dad tried to deceive until the very end and was very reluctant about the divorce and compensation, so the mediation didn't end quickly. But Abigail persistently questioned Dad, and the commotion became known even to those outside the company who were unaware of the chaos at the office. Consequently, acquaintances of Dad who were unaware of the situation gradually distanced themselves from him. Dad became completely isolated as a result. After the divorce, Abigail offered me a part of the compensation as an apology. This might not be enough to make amends, but I hope you'll accept it as an apology for the trouble I've caused. However, since I had kept my revenge against Dad a secret from Mom, I declined the money. Abigail, you're also a victim of Dad, and the children need the money more. Please keep it for them. Mom seemed to have put her past with Dad behind her, so I had no intention of bringing it up again. I thought that Mom, who must have suffered a lot, wouldn't want to remember it anymore, even after Dad received his comeuppance. I didn't harbor any resentment towards Abigail or her children, who were also victims of Dad. Instead, I frequently visited them, concerned about their well-being as a single-parent family. The children and I grew close. And I hope they grow up righteously, unlike Dad. Getting to know Abigail better, I realized she was naturally calm and not the type to raise her voice. The stark contrast to the woman who had fiercely confronted Dad in the company made me reconsider Mom's strength during the divorce. Later, I successfully got a job at my preferred company and shared the news with Mom, who was overjoyed at my growth. Seeing her happiness made me feel content. And without the shadow of Dad, I truly relished the moment. Determined to reduce Mom's burden, I geared up for my new job. I may never forgive Dad for his actions, but he's already received his just desserts. Now, I want to live happily, not worrying about Dad anymore. Lazy,
good-for-nothings who don't do housework or cook deserves a divorce. I'll demand $80,000 in compensation. Looking down at me lying in bed, Alexander suddenly blurted that out. Just when I thought he had come home, he's talking about divorce. Calling me useless for not doing housework or cooking. And claiming $80,000 in divorce compensation is absurd. Despite the fact that I've fallen ill due to the stress from Alexander. I had reached my limit with Alexander's unbearable treatment. But my body wouldn't move as I wished, and I couldn't even get up. I didn't want to let things go Alexander's way. With that determination, I forced a smile while still lying down. Fine by me. Alexander, not expecting me to agree to the divorce so easily, had a look of shock spread across his face. There's no turning back now. I'll make him regret all the times he's belittled me. My name is Amelia. I work at an IT company and I am turning 38 this year. Most of my work is remote and my days are busy but fulfilling. There are tough times, but it's a rewarding job. My friends from my student days often say, "It's amazing you can work so hard." It felt good to be respected for being so dedicated to my work. 2 years ago, I even started a family. I married my husband, Alexander. I met Alexander 4 years ago at a busy restaurant downtown, out for dinner with friends. As we were leaving the restaurant and walking. "Excuse me." I was approached from behind. I turned to see who it was. The man wore a shirt and a jacket, the epitome of a capable office worker. "You left this at the restaurant," he said, handing over a mobile phone. Which to my surprise was undoubtedly mine. "I'm sorry, thank you so much." "No problem, glad I made it in time." "Hey, would you like to go to a pub with me?" Alexander, relieved to have returned the phone, unexpectedly invited me out. Surprised again, I glanced at my friends who were about to part ways. They gave me a go-ahead smile as if saying, "Please go." "If you are okay with me, sure." Actually, I had messed up at work that day and still wanted to talk more. My friend had a date with her boyfriend and couldn't stay out late, so Alexander's invitation was perfect timing. After parting with my friend, I went to a nearby pub with Alexander. That was the beginning with my now husband, Alexander. At the pub, we shared work frustrations and quickly hit it off, feeling as comfortable as if we were old friends. When we left, Alexander asked for my contact. And we started seeing each other, leading to marriage 2 years later. It was surprisingly smooth, even astonishing to me. Considering my focus had always been on work, I was lucky to even get married. That's what I thought at the time. "Amelia, get me some beer," asked Alexander, lounging on the sofa and fiddling with his phone in the living room. I sighed yet again. How many times has it been? I've lost count. It's been 2 years since I married Alexander, and I'm nearing my limit with his sloppiness. Alexander, who works at a well-known bank, always boasts about being an elite and claims that people working at the bank are the most important. I had no idea before marrying that he thought so highly of himself. I knew he was proud of his work, but being constantly reminded is exhausting. "I'm tired of getting it for you. I'm busy, get it yourself." I was working and couldn't cater to Alexander's request, so I refused. Then Alexander, scratching the back of his head, said in annoyance, "You call remote work busy? I had all sorts of tasks at the office today and I'm exhausted." He scolded. "Just because it's remote work doesn't mean it's easy." Even when I retorted, he would shoot back at me with sarcasm. "Anyone can say that. You can take breaks whenever you want." I got tired of arguing back and silently stood up from my chair and reluctantly went shopping. "Here, I bought the beer." Alexander didn't thank me for shopping, nor did he pay for it, just silently taking the beer. Then he was absorbed in his phone again. This is more like master and servant than husband and wife. Why did Alexander marry me? No, why did I marry Alexander? I sighed. It goes without saying that Alexander left all the household chores to me and did none himself. As a dual-income couple, I once suggested we share the chores. Share the chores? Don't joke. You're always home, Amelia. It's only natural for you to do them. He laughed it off. But I do go to the office sometimes, and I can't always do all the chores. Office visits are rare, right? Hire a housekeeper for those days. Alexander stubbornly refused to do any chores. He belittles my job as easy, rushing me to finish the chores, and yet often seeks physical intimacy at night. However, there's no sign of us having children. If there's a reason, it's probably me. I've heard women in their late 30s have a harder time conceiving. I thought if we couldn't have children, we should enjoy our marriage, but Alexander seemed unhappy. Can't even have kids, what's the point of marriage? He said dismissively, and I was infuriated. He's useless at home himself. I doubt he's really competent at his job. A truly capable person manages personal affairs well and easily handles household chores. I had my doubts about Alexander's work performance. Speaking of doubts, in the past few months, Alexander's return home had been noticeably later than usual. I don't know about the busy season in banking, but when I comment, "You've been busy lately. Unlike you, my job is tough," he would just respond so and nothing else. Suspicion was inevitable when he continued coming home past midnight for months. I naturally suspected infidelity. One night, Alexander came home late as usual and collapsed at the entrance. Approaching him, he seemed too drunk to stand. With his eyes closing, he was about to lose consciousness. Sighing, I moved to unfasten his tie, and then Alexander muttered, "Hold up, Victoria. Come on, just a little longer?" Hearing that sweet, melting tone, I was shocked. "Victoria? Who's that?" Whether it was sleep talk or drunken confusion, Alexander simply fell into a comfortable sleep. Now seriously suspicious, I installed cameras around the house. Next week, I'll be away on a business trip for the weekend. If Alexander is cheating, it's the perfect opportunity to bring his lover home while I'm away. Of course, there's no certainty he'll bring someone home, but it would be evidence if he did. That's why I installed the cameras. A week later, with an oblivious face, I said, "Well then, I'm off on my business trip." To which Alexander waved smiling. "Have a good trip." His face looked too happy, and it angered me. 2 days later, returning from the trip, I immediately checked the camera footage. Sure enough, there was Alexander, bringing his lover home and into our bed. I couldn't watch it all, it made me nauseous, so I stopped midway. But this was clear evidence of infidelity. I clenched my fist, almost crushing the camera. This was unforgivable. There's a limit to how much he can mock me. Did he think this would be forgiven? Once it was certain Alexander was cheating, I was filled with anger and sadness. Afterward, each time Alexander insulted me about the food or the dirty floor, my stress built up. I was contemplating when to tell him about the divorce, but my work suddenly got busier and I lost the right timing. Eventually, overwhelmed by work and household chores, my body couldn't keep up. One day, I suddenly collapsed with a high fever. I took the day off work. Of course, I couldn't do any housework either. Alexander must have known I was unwell from the morning, but he left for work silently and returned home at 6 p.m. Earlier than usual. Then, he came to where I lay sick in bed. The smell of alcohol made me feel nauseous. Without a care for me, Alexander smirked. "Lazy, good-for-nothings who don't do housework or cook deserves a divorce. I'll demand $80,000 in compensation." Looking down at me lying in bed, Alexander suddenly blurted that out. Divorce, out of nowhere? Calling me useless for not doing housework or cooking? And demanding $80,000 in divorce compensation is absurd. I've fallen ill because of the stress from Alexander. I was reaching my limit with his treatment. But my body wouldn't move as I wished, and I couldn't even get up. I didn't want things to go Alexander's way. With that determination, I forced a smile while still lying down. Fine by me. Not expecting me to accept the divorce so easily, Alexander's face showed shock. There's no turning back now. I'll make him regret belittling me all this time.
A few days later, when my fever subsided and I was back to normal, I first got the divorce papers. After signing my part, I waited for Alexander to come home. I'm home. That day, Alexander came back at 10 p.m. reeking of alcohol and a perfume I'd never smelled before. I confronted him with the divorce papers as he arrived. Please, let's get divorced. When I said that in a low voice, Alexander laughed mockingly and took the papers. Finally, I can be free. It was unclear if his sarcastic remark was for me or himself, but he smirked disgustingly. If he wanted a divorce so much, he should have prepared the papers himself, but he probably wanted me to bring it up. I was disgusted with his nasty character. I'll claim for compensation in the divorce. Thinking Alexander pathetic for expecting compensation after cheating. I didn't say anything there, just silently watched the divorce proceedings. The next day, I submitted the divorce papers and was finally free from being Alexander's slave. The divorce ended anticlimactically. But just divorcing Alexander wasn't enough to forgive him. I decided to take action for revenge against Alexander. Over several days, I packed my belongings. I was leaving this house. It was a used apartment we bought when we married 2 years ago, but I wasn't attached. So, I decided to leave myself. Don't ever come back. Alexander watched me pack, laughing with glee. He was probably planning to live with his lover in this house once I left. A nauseating thought, but the footage showed Alexander was quite smitten with his lover. Ignoring Alexander's words, I left the house with my belongings. Phew, at least now I'm free from Alexander's abuse. I sighed in relief. I immediately went to a real estate agent and got introduced to a property I could move into right away. It was a bit small, but the rent was cheap and it was a nice women-only apartment. I quickly finalized the contract for the apartment. I'd have to live in a hotel for about a week until I could move in, but that was fine. Afterward, I finished some procedures at the bank and checked into the hotel. All the while, I was plotting my revenge against Alexander. And the plan I came up with gave me goosebumps. That's it. This is the only way. Imagining Alexander's astonished face made me almost laugh. Just watch. Don't think this is the end of the matter. The next day, I immediately set my plan into action. I felt bold for what I did. After finishing the work, I was satisfied. Afterward, life went on peacefully without any incidents. Being single again was so easy, not having to cook or do laundry for Alexander. I regretted not divorcing him sooner. A month later, I got a call in the middle of the night. Woken up by my mobile phone's ringtone, I wondered who it could be at this hour and saw it was Alexander. I ignored it at first, but the calls kept coming. Ignoring it further would only disrupt my sleep. Reluctantly, I answered the call. Hello? I answered sleepily, hearing the sounds of cars and buses in the background. Apparently, he was outside. I waited for Alexander's reply, clearly annoyed at being woken up and subjected to the noise. Amelia, you finally picked up. What is this about? Alexander's yelling voice echoed in my ear. I knew what he was going to say, but acted like I had no clue. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. I got a call from the bank yesterday. They suddenly fired me. I'm on my honeymoon in Italy, and this makes no sense. A honeymoon in Italy. There must be a significant time difference. Hence the call at this hour. Typical of Alexander, not considering my situation. That's tough. Good luck with that, bye. I responded casually, about to hang up. Hey, wait. But Alexander protested loudly, so I sighed and paused before hanging up. I asked why I was fired. They said I caused the bank to lose a client. And guess which company that client was? It was yours, Amelia. Alexander explained the circumstances of his firing, but I had expected this to happen. After all, I was the one who planned it. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. If I was going to get my revenge on Alexander, now was the time. After taking a deep breath, I began to speak.
Yes, I know. Because I'm the one who stopped doing business with your bank, Alexander.
There was a gasp of surprise on the other end. I could hear the pampered voice of his mistress next to Alexander. Unperturbed, I continued.
You might not have known, but it's my company. I'm the CEO.
Yes, I'm the CEO. Alexander thought I was just a regular remote worker, but in reality, I'm the boss, just not often on site. I quit my first job right after graduating college and succeeded in starting my own dream company within 3 years, which has been growing for over a decade. The bank where Alexander worked was the one that had provided significant loans to my company. After leaving Alexander, I decided to repay all the money I borrowed from the bank. The sales representative was shocked. They would lose the interest they were supposed to receive. The lump sum repayment must have been an unexpected event for the bank.
Could you reconsider your decision?
The sales representative asked me in a panic. To that, I placed my demand.
There's just one condition. Fire Alexander Grant.
I decided to request that. The representative hurriedly brought their supervisor. He was someone I knew from before.
What happened all of a sudden?
When the senior executive asked me, I decided to tell everything.
Actually, Alexander Grant was having an affair with your president's daughter. He mocked me terribly, divorced me without paying any compensation, and now he's about to remarry. I couldn't stand it.
The information about Alexander's affair with the president's daughter came from the footage of the hidden camera in the house. The audio was captured too, so I heard all the conversations between Alexander and his mistress. Both the representative and the executive turned pale when they heard my story and seemed to want to continue doing business with my company. Probably, the news reached the president, who must have been furious to learn his daughter was having an affair with a married man. They promised to fire Alexander, so I reconsidered the lump sum repayment. That's why I'm still doing business with the bank where Alexander worked. I knew about Alexander's firing even before he told me over the phone.
You're the dishonest one. You made me do all the housework, mocked me, and cheated. And yet you think I'm the bad one? Can't you see things ethically, Alexander? Is that what you call being an elite? Ridiculous. I'll claim for compensation in the divorce. To think you, the cheater, could claim anything is absurd. Also, I changed the ownership of the house loan. I was the one paying it, but now it's your responsibility.
I unloaded all the stress I had received onto Alexander over the phone.
What?
Alexander seemed unable to counter my justified argument. But then, a weaker voice than before came from the other end of the line. Please, forgive me. Spare me the divorce compensation. And the house loan too. Victoria is pregnant. I can't imagine being in debt when the child is born. I've been fired and am at a loss. Please, let me off the hook. Alexander's pathetic apology only made me sigh. I felt stupid for enduring this man for 2 years.
Forgive? There's nothing to forgive. I want nothing to do with you, Alexander. The compensation is a settlement. This is all your fault, isn't it? Why should I have to put up with it? I won't talk to you again. You can keep running away in Italy for all I care. Goodbye.
Ignoring Alexander's plea to wait, I hung up. He should be grateful I even answered his late-night call. Sighing, I went back to bed. I probably won't talk to Alexander again. I can live my life without any connection to him. Later, after Alexander and his mistress returned from Italy, my lawyer claimed the divorce compensation. Alexander had apparently spent a lot of money on his mistress, leaving almost no savings. The mistress, being the president's daughter, was scolded and disowned by her father. So, they couldn't rely on her parents' money and had to go into debt. Finding a new job was difficult for Alexander, as his recent scandal was widely known. Though he always claimed to be an elite banker, I heard he often slacked off at work, affecting his performance. For the company, it was a perfect excuse to fire him. Alexander and his mistress are now living off part-time jobs. With her being pregnant, she won't be able to work soon. I doubt Alexander can support 3 people on his own. Well, they deserve to struggle as far as I'm concerned. Meanwhile, my business is thriving. And I received a larger loan from the bank where Alexander worked. My salary has increased, and I'm planning to buy my own house. Building my own home has been a dream for a long time. And I'm looking forward to it. I may have lost a husband, but I have friends and supportive business partners. I'm in an incredibly fortunate situation and am ready to continue working hard. I thought it would be a piece of cake. I, being younger, could make him happier. She declared, arriving at the apartment where Mike and I lived a happy life. Standing beside her was Mike, with a grin on his face. To dispel this nightmare, I had to take action. I'm Lucy, a 26-year-old housewife. My husband, Mike, is 28 and works in sales at a printing company. I'm currently working part-time at a bookstore. Before getting married, I did various temp jobs and worked as a temporary government employee. But after marriage, I chose to work part-time. I'm not the most versatile person, so juggling a full-time job and household chores seemed impossible. Part-time work, along with housekeeping, feels just right for me. When Mike and I first met, he was unemployed. He had quit his job within just 6 months of starting at a company right after graduating from college. It was during his job search that he met me. During his job hunt, our paths crossed at the workforce center. I was working there as a temporary employee. Mike was the client I happened to assist at the reception. My first impression of him was that he was extremely friendly and charming. I immediately thought he'd be perfect in sales and recommended a few sales jobs. I remember feeling relieved when one of the jobs I recommended, at a printing company, turned out to be a success for Mike. When he came to report his employment with a beaming smile, I found myself unexpectedly smitten by him. Mike's face is cute. But at the same time he's tall, and the unexpected contrast seemed wonderful. He came to report his job acceptance just before lunch break, so as soon as the break started, I looked for Mike and stopped him. I remember it took a lot of courage to do that. Mike was about to leave the workforce center at that moment. I approached him as he seemed to be pondering over something, staring at his mobile phone screen by the entrance. Mike looked surprised when I spoke to him. I think my hands were trembling when I asked if we could exchange contact information. Mike's response was simply, "I'd like that too." I blushed, but so did Mike, his face as red as mine. We exchanged contacts, and that marked the beginning of our relationship. Mike, working in sales at the printing company, and I got married 2 months after we exchanged numbers. Our friends teased us for our whirlwind marriage. But I always thought, if I were to marry, it could only be Mike. When we got married, we bought an apartment as our new home. I thought it was a bold decision at the time, but now I believe it was the right choice. I was living the best marital life with Mike, my beloved, in our comfortable home. The change in our life came about 2 years after our marriage. I think it was around the time when Mike's job began to feel more stable. "Do you think I'm kind of cute?" Mike suddenly asked. Considering he never seemed interested in his own appearance, I immediately sensed someone must have mentioned it to him. "Yes, you're kind of cute. Did someone say that to you?" I asked. Laughing, Mike said it was a comment from a new employee. I thought it was quite inappropriate for someone who had just joined the company to say such a thing. Mike, not entirely displeased, said, "Cute, huh?" while looking in the mirror. I told Mike to be more careful since he was being teased by younger people. Following that incident, Mike began to pay more attention to his clothes and skincare. His spending increased, and so did the bills on our credit card. When he came home from work, he would constantly hold on to his mobile phone. I started suspecting infidelity. Once I started thinking that way, it was all downhill from there. I began to doubt everything Mike did. Our good relationship until then perhaps made the backlash stronger. Although Mike appeared more buoyant than before, he didn't seem to hide it from me, which was a bit reassuring. I thought if he had something to hide, he would act suspiciously. But I was being naive. Mike's spending habits were getting worse day by day. I decided to have a serious talk with him during dinner. I told him that we should save money now, as we'll need more when we have kids. Mike didn't seem to grasp the seriousness. I emphasized it even more. Without any evidence of Mike's infidelity, I watched him become increasingly youthful in appearance and lived in frustration. But soon, the situation took a dramatic turn. I was in a hurry one morning to hang the laundry on the balcony before leaving for my part-time job. That's when I noticed someone standing in front of our apartment, looking my way. A woman in her early 20s, it seemed. Moreover, she appeared to be filming me with her mobile phone. For a moment, our eyes met through her mobile phone, and I felt a chill of fear. I quickly went back inside the house from the balcony. Even though I hadn't done anything wrong, my heart was racing. I thought she must be Mike's mistress. Maybe she came to spy on me, the wife. The next day, I was stopped by the owner at the entrance. He warned me about a woman who seemed to be inquiring about me. She was asking how much our apartment cost, whether Mike and I were happily married, and had been gathering information around the apartment. It was the same as being publicly announced that I was being cheated by Mike. Reaching my limit, I finally confronted Mike. "You've been glued to your mobile phone lately. Who are you waiting to hear from?" I asked. Mike responded, "It's just work." I told him about the encounter with the apartment owner, pretending not to know. "There seems to be a woman snooping around our home. Do you know anything about this?" Mike's hand, holding his phone, began to tremble slightly. Sweat appeared on his forehead, even though it wasn't hot. Just as I was about to press him further, the intercom rang. I answered it, reluctantly, and there she was, the woman, smiling on the screen. I was momentarily stunned. "She's a client of mine. She has something to discuss with you," Mike said. He unlocked the door and welcomed her in. The woman who appeared at the door seemed younger than I had imagined. Almost like a high school student. She was introduced as an office worker dispatched to Mike's company. She held Mike's hand, smiling broadly, and her lack of common sense startled me. Then she declared, "I'm dating Mike." To me. And then she announced to me. While I stood there, stunned, the two of them looked at each other and laughed. Holding each other's hands. "You're less important to me than she is." "I want to start over with Betty," Mike said, sounding like a victim. I felt my blood boil at his words. The two seemed to be reveling in their own tragedy, and Betty was even shedding tears as she looked at me. Mike then hurled cruel words at me. He said our marriage was a mistake, that it was too hasty, and we hadn't thought it through. Finally, he even said he thought it was a mistake to have loved me. He claimed he became his true self thanks to her. His words, like poison, made me feel dizzy. However, I sensed Mike was avoiding a decisive statement. He didn't want to be the one to say divorce. I could feel the two of them waiting for me to bring it up. "Fine. I don't want anything. Let's get divorced," I said, raising my hands in surrender. Mike relaxed his shoulders in relief at my words. Betty looked at Mike with joy. "Thank you. I thought it would be easy since you looked older than Mike described. It's only natural for someone younger like me to make Mike happier. It's right for you to step aside," Betty said, without a hint of malice. Maybe she really didn't mean any harm. But to the one hearing it, those words could only be taken as malicious. I was incredibly irritated. Our marriage was quick, but the divorce proceedings were even quicker. I spent an unbelievable day filing for divorce with Mike's mistress, Betty. Now that the divorce papers are filed, technically, Mike and I are strangers to each other. The buoyant couple apparently reserved a luxury hotel for tonight. I'm alone in the apartment, packing my things. I told Mike I didn't want anything. I didn't ask for any property division, but I decided to claim alimony. No need for child support, as we don't have kids. Though she's paying me alimony, it seems like Mike will end up paying for her share too. Right after filing the divorce papers, as we were parting, Betty said,
"Please leave that apartment soon. Mike and I will be living there, so a middle-aged woman should vacate quickly."
She said it in a sickly sweet voice, arm in arm with Mike. It irritated me greatly, but I kept my composure. Smiling outwardly, I vowed revenge against them in my heart. I left the apartment that I shared with Mike as soon as I packed my belongings. I've left everything else to my lawyer. I made Mike and her sign an agreement not to contact me after the divorce. I almost laughed, remembering how happily they signed it. A month passed, and just when I thought it was about time, my mobile phone rang. It was Mike calling. Knowing he must be panicking, I deliberately took my time answering.
"What? You signed an agreement not to contact me." "I don't want to hear from you now," I said. "What do you mean? $2,000 a month for the apartment? $1,500 for credit repayments? How am I supposed to pay this every month?"
Mike must be holding the credit statement and the apartment payment request right now. I always managed our finances during our marriage. I was in charge of the account into which Mike's salary was deposited. When we decided to buy the apartment, Mike showed no interest in the monthly repayments. How much did he think we needed each month? Mike's take-home pay is about $1,700. It's not an amount he can afford to pay every month.
"That's why I kept telling you not to waste money,"
I said.
"But we were supposed to be living off my salary. It's impossible with just a part-time job."
Mike was almost crying, in a state of disarray. His life was turned upside down. Indeed, I have a part-time job. But unknown to Mike, I had another job. I've been blogging about my daily life and have continued streaming since before we got married. Mike didn't know, but I've also published a book. I earn more than Mike's salary every month. The part-time job was just for show. Mike was under the illusion that he was covering all expenses with his salary. I relinquished my rights to the property and handed over the apartment to Mike for this reason. Alimony from Mike, covering Betty's alimony, the remaining credit payments, and monthly apartment installments. Mike's finances must have tightened significantly.
I could hear Betty's voice in the background. "What's going on? I didn't know we were paying installments."
She seemed to be causing a ruckus. I even heard the sound of a cup breaking. Then shamelessly, Mike asked me for help. He couldn't maintain his life with his salary alone and wanted me to help with the apartment installments. Unbelievable.
"What? Don't be ridiculous. Work hard and support each other with your young, pretty girlfriend."
I mocked him and hung up. I immediately blocked Mike's number. I had kept it unblocked just for this day. Now, I no longer needed Mike's number. Deleting his contact felt refreshing. Later, I heard that Mike and Betty couldn't maintain the apartment and had to put it up for sale quickly.
Betty, who married Mike immediately after our divorce, learned about his real salary and started claiming, "It's a scam, I was deceived," leading to a lawsuit.
It seems she's accusing him of fraud for misrepresenting his financial situation during marriage. Probably, Mike just didn't know about his own financial situation. Mike is working a side job at night after his main job, just to make the payments. Betty divorced Mike quickly. I moved to the countryside, which I had always wanted, and continue my graceful country living blog. I'm preparing to start a YouTube channel next month.
Don't make cakes that taste bad. It looked suspicious, so I tasted it first. I felt it so unhealthy, though I threw the garbage out the window.
In an instant, I realized this situation was a complete disaster.
You threw away the cake? I'm still at work.
I am Karen. I'm 28 years old and work at a bank. I got married last year and am still in the honeymoon phase. My husband, Mark, is 30 and works as a pharmacist. We met on social media, of all places. I love music and often post about my favorite artists. Mark shared my passion for music. At first, we communicated through direct messages. I was hesitant to meet someone I knew only in social media.
But, strangely, I found myself wanting to meet Mark. He lived about an hour's drive away. It's not far from my home. I figured a meal would be harmless, so I gathered the courage to meet him. Surprisingly, I felt completely at ease, as if we'd met before. Our conversation flowed without a break. I found myself passionately talking about our favorite artists. Perhaps because we'd been in touch every day, there was a strangely close feeling. After that, we went out for meals a few times. From good morning to good night, we were in constant contact. Before I knew it, I was eagerly awaiting his messages. And then we officially started dating. It was surprising, even to myself. My mom passed away from illness soon after I started working. We had a close relationship, like friends. Being from a single-parent family, I felt very lonely. That's when Mark came into my life. To me, Mark was a savior. He's also very dedicated to his work. When we're together, Mark seems most animated when talking about work. He listens attentively to my work-related issues. And supports me. That's what I love about Mark. Mark's mother, Jane, has been incredibly kind since when we started dating. Knowing I don't have parents.
Karen, you can tell me anything. Whether it's troubles or complaints, anything is fine. I want to be close to you. Let's not be formal and just be ourselves.
She always looked out for me. Eating out is nice, but homemade meals are good once in a while, right? She would say like that, and invited me to enjoy her home cooking. When Mark proposed and we decided to get married, she cried tears of joy. Since I don't have parents, we decided not to have a wedding. Jane, understanding and kind, was all right with that. After we got married, Jane moved in with us. Mark's father passed away when he was young, and Jane raised him single-handedly. In today's world, where it's normal for women to work, but some people still oppose it. One of a friend of mine struggled with this problem, so it was on my mind. I love my job and wanted to continue working even after getting married. But I got married, it wasn't just about what I wanted. When I talked to Jane about this, "Isn't it wonderful to enjoy your work? Of course, I'll help you. I'll do the household chores, so don't worry. It makes me happy to have a job to do. I get restless if I'm not doing something. Leave the cleaning and doing laundry to me." She understood and supported my desire to work, making mother-in-law issues non-existent.
Going out with Jane on days when Mark at work is really fun.
Though everything seems perfect, there is someone I struggle with. Mark has an older brother, Tom, and his wife, Betty. Tom got married 6 years ago and has a 5-year-old daughter, Sally. When we first met after our marriage was decided, "You seem like you're good at sucking up, getting along well with Jane. Lucky for you." Her comment, which sounded like sarcasm, left me speechless at our first meeting. I tried to minimize contact with her, but it's not always easy. Betty often leaves Sally with Jane. "I'm going for a drink today, so please let her stay over. She's picky with food, so just give her some bread for now." She would hand over a single Danish before leaving for her weekly outings. Even if she loves Danish, eating the same thing over and over isn't good. Jane would say this with a wry smile. But Sally is a really picky eater, only eating sweets or Danish. Sally is smaller than other kids her age. I was a bit concerned but didn't think too deeply about it because she seemed healthy. Jane adored Sally. Although I had doubts about Betty's weekly outings, but it made Jane happy, so I let it be. Betty, a stay-at-home wife, dislikes working women. She wasn't pleased about me working. When Mark and I were getting married, marriage only makes sense with someone who can perfectly manage household chores. Carefully choose someone who can handle quality ingredients to avoid getting sick. Usually, working women are arrogant, so think it through. She was negative towards me. Betty is stubborn and set in her ways, rarely listening to others. Thanks to Jane's support, Mark and I were able to get married. Even after our marriage, Betty would insult me whenever she saw me. A woman's worth is in childbearing, not just working. Start raising kids early. I doubt you're cut out for it. Working and parenting are totally different. Career women always seem so self-centered.
She constantly belittled me. Amidst this, we decided to celebrate Jane's 60th birthday.
Since she's always been so kind, I wanted to do something special for her.
Due to a pandemic, we planned to have it at home. As the host of the party, I was in charge of cooking. I knew Jane's favorite dishes and was excited planning the menu. The number of attendees was 6 in total, including my family and Tom's family. I planned to take the afternoon off to prepare for the day.
But, due to a sudden issue at work, I had to work the whole day. Such last-minute changes were common in my job.
So, I had to adjust my plans. I had planned to cook in the afternoon, but that was no longer possible. I quickly ordered the steaks and appetizers I had previously thought of. When I told Mark about this,
"I'll probably finish work earlier, so I can pick them up.
Don't worry. The steak will be a hit." I was relieved that we could start at the planned time. I was also planning a surprise, which made me smile just thinking about it. Just as I was about to finish work, I received a call.
It was from Betty. She rarely made phone calls, so I wondered what was up. She sounded in a bad mood.
"Hey, Karen. Where are you for Jane's 60th birthday celebration? Get ready quickly. You said you were in charge of cooking, but I bet you haven't done anything. I only feed my child with organic products, so don't buy anything weird. Make sure the dishes are photogenic. And where's the key? I can't get in." She was aggressive right from the start. With so many complaints, I didn't know what to respond to first.
But I wasn't late.
There was still over an hour until the meeting time, but she acted as if I was delaying things. Also as the food, but all expenses were on us. So she really wasn't in a position to complain.
"Betty, aren't you come a bit early? There's no one at home right now. Mark will be home soon, so you can ask him then let you in."
Her voice sounded as irritated because she wanted to get into the house early. I think she just came early because she had nothing else to do. "Hurry up! Waiting in this heat is like telling to get heat stroke," she said.
"Please wait in your car to avoid the heat. It won't be much longer. Sorry."
After I said this, "Hurry up! I don't want to waste gas." And she hung up abruptly. It seemed she was upset because Jane happened to be out and nobody was home. I contacted to Mark, and he said he was almost home, so I left her to him.
The thought of going back was daunting.
Because of worrying about Betty's behavior, I decided to call Mark before heading home to check on things. Then, I learned that Sally was happily playing in a plastic pool Jane had set up at home. Just as I was about to head back, relieved, but I received another call from Betty.
Apprehensively, I answered, only to hear,
"Don't make cakes that taste bad." It looked suspicious, so I tasted it first. I felt it so unhealthy, though I threw the garbage out the window. In an instant, I realized this situation was a complete disaster. "Did you throw away the cake?" "I'm still at work, and I didn't make that cake." Turns out, she had thrown the cake out the window. Hearing this fact, I panicked. The cake was actually the highlight of the day, a surprise cake for Jane. Moreover, someone had painstakingly made it for her. Betty refused to believe that I hadn't made it. "Huh? I can't believe someone who cooks regularly would make a cake like that. I was shocked you were planning to serve it. Shame on you." And she completely refused to believe it. I decided to rush home to assess the situation.
Then, I heard Sally crying over the phone. The worst possible turn of events.
Apparently, the cake had fallen where Tom and Sally were playing outside.
The cake was a surprise that Tom and Sally had made for Jane the day before.
Originally, I had planned to make the cake. While talking to Mark, I learned Sally was enjoying helping out in the kitchen. Thinking it would be special, I suggested to Tom that Sally could help make the cake, to which he agreed enthusiastically.
Unfortunately, Betty was out at the time and unaware of this.
It was a plan to make Jane feel extra special with a cake made by her beloved Sally. Sally's crying was getting louder on the phone. Unable to stay put, I hurried to go home. When I arrived, the atmosphere was tense. Tom was normally calm, but was raising his voice.
Regardless of who made it, it's not right to just throw it away. And who opens the fridge in someone else's house as they please? Don't you have any common sense?
To this, Betty responded,
I just didn't want Sally to eat something strange.
Food is important. Unlike you, I'm taking parenting seriously. Betty and Tom started a heated argument. Jane was desperately trying to comfort Sally. I suspected Betty threw away the cake I made for out of spite. After handing Sally to Tom, Jane angrily confronted the situation.
How can you do something like this? This is not what adults do. Even children understand that. And what's this about organic? Feeding her only Danish all the time is not healthy. She needs a varied diet. Sally is the one suffering.
This was the first time I saw Jane was angry. I was shocked. But she voiced everything I couldn't say. Despite Betty was unyielding. She's just picky.
What's wrong with letting her eat Danish she likes? If I'm going to be criticized for every little thing, I won't bother leaving her with you anymore. I thought I was doing you a favor since you're always so free.
Tom couldn't stay silent.
Doing you a favor? Sally had been taken care of, isn't her? You're out every week, and is it your right attitude?
Tom was right. I knew Jane sometimes canceled her plans for Sally. Realizing Betty brought her over with such intentions made me feel sorry for Sally. Jane couldn't stay quiet either.
What do you think Sally is? Aren't you her mother? It's not okay to leave your child every week to have fun. Have you ever really thought about her picky eating? It won't get better by ignoring it. She barely plays outside, right? Her skin is so pale in the summer.
Betty was furious at this.
Girls should have white skin, and being small is cuter. Playing outside would make me tan too. It's just a cake, and you're blowing this out of proportion. You guys are creepy family.
I had been silent about something until now.
Betty had frequently harassed me.
For example, she secretly added a lot of salt to the food I made, making it too much salty. And some of the accessories I bought during my single days disappeared from our house. I seized the moment to reveal everything. Betty became quiet and embarrassed. Tom was shocked and kept apologizing.
The atmosphere was far from celebratory.
Tom revealed that he had seen unfamiliar accessories at their home. Betty quieted down after this.
I just borrowed them, that's all. You're making a big deal out of nothing.
Betty's excuses were painfully inadequate. Then, Sally spoke up.
Mom, it's not nice to be mean. If you want something from a friend, you have to ask. My kindergarten teacher said so. If you make a mistake, just say sorry and you can be friends again. If you made a mistake, Mom, just say sorry and it'll be okay. Everyone was instantly soothed by Sally's words.
Tom and his family understandably felt uncomfortable. Tom then said,
Maybe we should go home today.
He suggested. But I knew leaving now wouldn't be good.
It would make it awkward next time.
I insisted they stay.
I didn't want this milestone birthday party to end on a sour note.
I hurried to the fridge. I thought about what I could make with the leftovers from yesterday. Luckily, there was still cream and fruit.
There was still time.
I quickly shifted to hosting a crepe party. We had appetizers and steaks, too. I invited Sally to help me for making crepes. Sally was in a great mood again. Everyone was soothed by her cheerfulness, which helped them reset their emotions.
The 60th birthday party for Jane finally started.
Betty looked uncomfortable, but today was about celebrating Jane. We all enjoyed steaks, gave presents, and ate crepes. Sally's cheerful demeanor was soothing to everyone.
Children are angels, really.
I later learned that Betty had been quite domineering at home too. Since that incident, she had become much more subdued. In a way, it was a good opportunity, I think. This incident shed light on aspects that were previously unseen. Betty had a habit of overspending, indulging in daily lunches with her friends. Tom confronted her and learned everything. As a result, Tom took over managing their finances, which put an end to her extravagant spending. With less to do at home, Tom encouraged her to start a part-time job. It seems she's finally feeling the challenges of working outside. It had been a long time since she had worked outside. At her part-time job, a veteran employee told her, "Someone with such a long break is not useful. It's not worth the hourly wage if you can't learn quickly. Get up to speed and become competent." It appeared she was being trained quite rigorously. When she returns home unable to do much because of exhausted. Naturally, she's not making homemade organic meals anymore. Their reliance on prepared food from supermarkets were increased. However, there was a positive side to this change. Sally started eating a lot more. She was no longer interested in Danish, but in hamburgers, pizzas, and chicken tenders. It seems she had never enjoyed such kid-friendly meals before. Children generally don't favor organic or low-carb diets. Now, Sally says, "For my birthday, I want to eat store-bought hamburgers and fried chicken." Her appetite has improved. While junk food isn't great every day, but enjoying what you eat is important. Enjoying food is also a part of food education. Betty used to post about her organic dishes on social media. They were always stylishly presented, regardless of taste. But after this incident, she stopped doing that. It seems she was seeking validation through social media likes. It's the best for being stopped. She's lucky she didn't end up in divorced. Since that day, Betty has awkwardly stopped visiting. Now, Tom brings Sally over by himself. Sally seemed more relaxed and free, even enjoying snacks now. She appeared noticeably brighter and happier. And Jane is also happy to see the peace. As for us, we continue to live happily with Jane. And now, I'm expecting our first child. The whole family is overjoyed. We're all busy preparing baby items for the new addition. I hope we continue to live as a happy family.
My ex-girlfriend is there. I have to go pick her up. Cliff, my husband, said this, staring at a woman as if mesmerized. I was shocked and speechless at his sudden outburst. This happened on our wedding day, while we were on our way to the ceremony in the car. Cliff abruptly hit the brakes and stopped, seemingly observing the situation for a while. The woman Cliff was looking at was carrying a heavy load of luggage. Then, suddenly panicking, Cliff said to me, "You're in the way. Get out of the car, quickly." My name is Helena. I'm a 29-year-old nurse. Cliff and I are the same age, and we met through a friend's introduction. I'm so busy with work, I hardly have time for dating, but I do want to marry if I meet the right person. I told my friend in a bit of a tough request. She said, "I know the perfect person for you. I'll bring them over next time," and went out of her way to arrange a meeting for me. At that time, I was working hard as an active nurse. I wanted someone strong who could pull me along. Cliff was exactly the man of my dreams. He took pride in his work and had a good sense of confidence, approaching everything with seriousness. I hardly ever talked to men outside of work, so I was nervous, but
being a nurse must be very tough, especially now. I guess healthcare workers are having a hard time, both mentally and physically,"
Cliff said. His consideration comforted me greatly. I responded, "Yes, it's challenging, but look at you, Cliff. I feel I should strive to do better." Cliff blushed at that. I was drawn to Cliff, not just his serious side, but his ability to laugh too. We dated smoothly after that and decided to get married. I felt I could live and we'd support each other without changing my life with him. I loved my job, so I naturally continued working after marriage. But one day,
"There's something I need to talk to you about."
Cliff came up to me with an angry look and said, reflecting on whether I had done something to upset Cliff, I remembered him suddenly asking,
"Can you quit your job?"
surprised. Why? I love my current job. I don't want to quit. Did I do something to upset you? I tried to remain calm and replied. Then Cliff said,
"A wife who works harder than her husband? What will people think of me? From now on, Helena, you will quit your job and focus all your energy on housework. And I'll support you, okay?"
He spoke in a commanding tone. Honestly, it was the first time I had seen Cliff like this, and I found it quite strange. I told Cliff, if you wanted a housewife, you should have said that before we got married. Then we could have discussed it. Cliff replied,
"I've never met someone so dedicated to their job and striving for perfection. I thought it would be great if you became a housewife after marriage and took care of the household chores perfectly, as I'm not good at them."
He said quietly. Angry, I said, then why not hire a maid? Or did you just want someone who could do perfect housework without costing anything? To which Cliff said,
"Don't be ridiculous. Of course not. If I didn't feel comfortable with someone, I wouldn't marry and live with them."
I was torn, but still in the early days of marriage, and with feelings for Cliff, I thought I should try harder. Hesitantly, I said, if that's the case, I'll try a bit harder with the housework, but I'm not quitting my job. And please don't talk about such things until you can cover the living expenses of 2 adults on your own income. And I continued working. Cliff, perhaps very upset, not only stopped doing housework, but also began to constantly monitor what I did. Naturally, my workload only increased. There were days when I skimped on housework because of work. Then Cliff would pounce on the opportunity to criticize, taking pride in pointing out what was wrong. Frustrated, I told Cliff, I get it, housework isn't your thing. It's okay if it's not perfect. But since we both work, it would be nice if you helped a bit. Cliff sighed in exasperation.
"That's what I've been saying. I don't like doing housework because I'm not good at it. It's hard to balance work and housework, so you should just quit your job."
He just wouldn't listen. I couldn't take it anymore and said, when will you understand that our household can't function without both incomes? Without my salary, we'd barely manage to pay the rent and fixed expenses. But he didn't seem to care. Whenever the subject of his earnings came up, Cliff quickly changed the subject. Then,
"Maggie was much more perfect at it. I'm surprised there's such a difference between two women. No matter how good you are at your job, failing at housework, a woman's job, is a failure as a woman. Be grateful I married you, even though you can't do it perfectly."
Cliff said. Maggie was the girl Cliff dated before me. I was angry to be compared to his ex-girlfriend, but I also understood what he meant. Even though I was quite trusted at work, as a woman, I lacked charm. Not just because I was married, but I was aware of my lack of femininity. Knowing this, hearing it from Cliff only made me more determined. But the reality was that we couldn't live on Cliff's salary alone. So I continued working as before, but tried to be more efficient with housework. Cliff was always watching, trying to find chores I hadn't done, but since I did everything perfectly, he eventually had nothing to say. Finally, peace seemed to have returned to our home. One day, we were having a meal with both our parents. When my mother Brenda asked about the wedding, I excitedly shared my dream. I always wanted a wedding, so I saved up for it. I want a glamorous ceremony that everyone attending will enjoy. While Brenda and my mother-in-law, Anaya, clapped in agreement with my idea, Cliff said,
"Do we really need to go that far? Besides, the guests probably aren't even interested in our wedding. They might think it's a hassle to give a wedding gift, but if they don't come, they'll be seen as unsociable, right? I bet they only come because they feel they have to. No one really gets moved by someone else's happiness, right? Isn't that just something from a drama?"
He laughed, completely dismissing my opinion. I had never thought like Cliff at any weddings I attended, so I was infuriated. Why attend if you feel that way? Cliff went on.
"Actually, if you have that much savings, why not share some with me? I work hard all day, sweating it out. Oh, I want a motorcycle. Let's save on the wedding and honeymoon and buy me a bike instead."
And just like that, he started planning to spend as little as possible, all for his motorcycle. Looking at our parents, I saw their faces tense, holding back what they wanted to say. Feeling unsettled, my in-laws quickly spoke up. Cliff, enough is enough. You're completely dismissing Helena's wishes and only thinking about yourself. How can you even think of using the money Helena saved for the wedding on a bike just for you? Anaya scolded him. My father-in-law Jordan added, People have different views on weddings, so it's natural for you and Helena to disagree. But to outright reject and insult her, and then just try to take her money. Do you realize how despicable you look right now? If you keep this up, you might end up divorced before you even get married. He scolded his son. I told Cliff, I've always been moved and had fun at weddings. Seeing a bride happy always brings tears to my eyes. It's a moment when you can feel how much the groom values the bride, and I even thank them for having the ceremony. Some friends have come up with events to make sure their guests have a good time, and I truly enjoyed those. But I guess you think differently. That's fine. Why don't we save on the wedding and spend more on our honeymoon? I was glad my in-laws scolded him. But no matter how much they tried to get through to Cliff, it wouldn't matter if he himself didn't want to change. I was about to compromise and agree to Cliff's idea of a wedding when he suddenly said, No, forget it. I'll grant all your wishes. Those weddings you've attended must have been really good, huh? Then let's make ours even better. Cliff suddenly became serious. He's the kind of person who doesn't like being compared to others. Plus, the warning from his parents about a possible divorce seemed to have made him reflect. Our parents looked relieved. It'll be busy, but make sure you discuss things together. It's not right to only push through one person's opinion, but not saying anything because they won't listen is also wrong. Always share your feelings with each other, my mother said. Seeing Cliff's change, Anaya almost triumphantly said, Cliff, that's more like it. I knew you'd understand if you talked about it. Look, Helena, how about this cute dress? It would suit you perfectly. She began suggesting ideas while smiling and flipping through a magazine. Helena, don't hold back. If you need more money, we can help cover the costs. She even offered. I felt bad and said we'd plan within our budget, but my in-laws seemed really excited about the wedding, which made me happy. They had treated me like their own daughter since we started dating. If Cliff ever does anything terrible to you, tell us right away. They continued to assure me. From then on, we were able to proceed smoothly with the wedding preparations. Cliff said, We'll have a wedding like no one else has ever had. He started researching enthusiastically in books and on the internet, bringing more ideas than even me. Seeing other weddings, he'd say, This looks nice, and smile naturally. Watching him, I felt reassured that the beauty of weddings was getting through to him. We both loved to delve deep into things once we decide to do them. In our discussions with the wedding planner, time would fly by, and the days, though busy, felt peaceful and enjoyable. Finally, the day of our wedding arrived. It was a hot summer day, but the weather was clear, so we were relieved we could have the ceremony without issues. Cliff was also enthusiastic, and we woke up early, fully prepared to leave. We were driving to the venue with Cliff at the wheel. If we continued driving normally, we'd easily make it to the ceremony on time. While looking forward to it, suddenly, Cliff hit the brakes. I panicked and asked, What happened? There was no immediate danger, and I couldn't understand why Cliff had stopped so suddenly. Then Cliff said, Let me pull over for a moment. He steered the car to the side of the road. Suddenly he exclaimed, I knew it, there's Maggie, and stared at a woman walking on the sidewalk for a while. Surprised and speechless at his sudden outburst, I noticed that Maggie seemed to be struggling with heavy luggage, occasionally stopping to rest. From Cliff's reaction, I wondered if he was considering helping her because she seemed to be having a hard time. Though I felt complicated emotions watching him stare, I was relieved when Cliff resumed driving. To be honest, I had been feeling that Cliff might still have feelings for his ex-girlfriend. He always compared what I did to her, complaining whenever he felt I didn't measure up. I had hoped he wouldn't do such a thing on our wedding day, and was relieved it seemed to be an overthought. However, after a few left turns and losing sight of his ex-girlfriend, Cliff pulled over again and looked at me with a smile. "You're in the way. Get out of the car," he said abruptly. Shocked, I responded, "What? Why? Are you going to talk to her? You know today is our wedding day, right?" Cliff replied, "She was carrying so much stuff. It must have been hard. Just do what I say." Then he forcefully pulled me out of the car by my arm. "Don't follow me. Don't you dare." He said that and drove off alone. Afterward, I was too stunned to think and just stood there. I couldn't catch up to the car, and I didn't have my wallet or phone with me. Anger began to build at the thought that he didn't care about our wedding, but I walked to the venue alone, not wanting to cause trouble. I thought even if Cliff didn't show up, I could tell my in-laws that my belongings were still in the car, and they would help me retrieve them. Thinking about the future, I soon arrived at my destination. The walk wasn't too far, and I arrived on time, but it was exhausting under the hot sun without a parasol. Entering the building to take a break, I found Cliff looking visibly downcast. It made sense that he arrived before me since he was in a car, but why was he here if he had gone to see Maggie? As I wondered, Anaya rushed over upon noticing me. "Elena, I'm so sorry for our foolish son. Are you okay? It's been hot, hasn't it? Here, drink this," she said, offering me water. After gratefully accepting it. "So what happened with Maggie?" I asked Cliff. Cliff responded, "She said she didn't need help and ran away. Some guy I didn't know took her away. I had no choice but to come here." He spoke indifferently, as if his mind was elsewhere. While I looked at him suspiciously, my in-laws paraded Cliff. "We've already said this, but leaving your wife on your wedding day to talk to an ex-girlfriend is unbelievable. What were you thinking? We don't expect her to forgive you, but you owe her a heartfelt apology." Cliff looked utterly dejected. Anaya added sadly, "We actually arrived much earlier than you two because we were so excited. But then Cliff showed up alone, and we were like, 'Where's Elena?' So we pressed him, and that's when we found out what happened." I then asked, "After she rejected you, why didn't you come back for me?" I asked Cliff. "Maggie was really angry, huh? She called you the worst, and I just lost all motivation. I figured you'd come to the venue anyway, so I thought I'd just wait here," he said. Looking closer, I noticed Cliff's cheek was red and swollen, later learning that Jordan had hit him, unable to hold back his anger. Then, to our surprise, Maggie arrived, with an unfamiliar man by her side, introducing him politely as her husband Nelson. Nelson glared at Cliff. "You tried to force a reluctant woman into your car, then run away at the sight of her face? I heard from Maggie. You've been following her, even after breaking up. And today, on your own wedding day, abandoning your wife to approach an ex-girlfriend is beyond low." He was visibly angry. Maggie glared at Cliff, then turned to me. "We did date, that's true, but we broke up, and I have no interest in Cliff anymore. I had no idea he'd leave you on your wedding day to come talk to me. I'm so sorry." I hurriedly stopped her apology. "No, don't apologize. It's Cliff's fault, not yours." Maggie sighed in relief at my words. Cliff, losing his target of anger, glared at me, tears spilling from his eyes. "If you had stopped me more, none of this would have happened. Don't you feel any pain seeing me blamed like this?" I was about to retort that it was his own fault, but Maggie and her husband started berating Cliff. Maggie said, "Enough already. I kept quiet before because only I was troubled, but now you've bothered both your wife and my dear husband. I won't forgive this. Don't think you'll get away with it." She glared fiercely at Cliff. Nelson added, "What's with that victim's face? You've hurt both your wife and someone else's. Don't play the martyr." He looked at Cliff with utter disdain. I said to Maggie, "You and your husband did nothing wrong. On the contrary, we owe you an apology for the inconvenience caused by Cliff. From what he said, it seems he was indeed asking you to get back together." I asked her about that. Maggie sighed deeply and nodded. "Actually, Our home is quite close to Cliff's parents. He's ambushed me several times, pretending it was coincidental, and demanded we get back together. I always tried not to provoke him, but made it clear I wasn't interested. He was quick to anger, and I feared he might turn violent, so I kept it from my husband. But now I think I should have told him sooner. She looked on the verge of tears. Nelson added,
I understand why my wife couldn't talk about it before. Seeing how unreasonable this man is, who knows what he might do if confronted. I don't blame her,
he said. They seemed like a caring couple, and though they were strangers to me, I was glad Maggie had found someone good. I said to Maggie, It's okay, we're the ones who should apologize for the trouble. Even when you said he was busy with work, he was pestering you. I'm really sorry. I apologized frantically. Then, seeing Cliff still looking unconvinced, I yelled at him. You need to apologize too. Your actions have caused trouble for so many people. What are you going to do about it? But Cliff just frowned in response. It was Maggie's husband who lost patience with Cliff's demeanor.
Apologies are fine, but looking at that face, I doubt any real remorse. Anyway, I want nothing to do with you. Promise never to interfere with another man's wife again,
he shouted. Cliff, his face turning red, stepped towards Maggie's husband.
Maggie and I dated before she met you, so I know her better than you do. I want to get back together. If you're lonely after divorce, we can swap wives. Let's do that. She works hard, so she has money,
Cliff said, as if it was a brilliant idea. His nonsensical words left not just me, but also Maggie and her husband speechless. Watching him excitedly talk about the days he would divorce and he would marry Maggie, I made up my mind. Let's cancel the wedding. I told Cliff, then apologized to my in-laws. I'm sorry. I know you were looking forward to today, but as you can see, I can't marry Cliff. I'm sorry it has come to this after all your kindness. The in-laws replied,
Elena, you did nothing wrong, and we think your decision is correct. We're truly sorry for our son's foolishness and the trouble he's caused.
They apologized, tears in their eyes. Looking around calmly, I noticed many venue staff observing our situations. Relatives and friends were due to arrive soon. Feeling too guilty to cancel at this point, I talked with the staff to turn the event from a wedding into a dinner party, deciding not to accept any wedding gifts. The venue staff, seemingly accustomed to such situations, arranged everything efficiently despite their disapproving glances at Cliff. I was filled with gratitude. Cliff, unconcerned about the attendees, kept dreaming about his married life with Maggie, cheerfully planning this and that while I talked with the staff. Seeing Maggie and her husband glaring at him with such disgust, I was amazed at how he could talk like that. After wrapping up the explanation, I went back to Cliff and told him I agreed to a divorce. As expected, Cliff showed no sadness and accepted it with joy. Right then, guests began to arrive. My in-laws, parents, and I kept apologizing to the attendees, urging them to at least enjoy the dinner party. I had never intended to discuss such a foolish situation, but Cliff was gleefully telling everyone about the wedding cancellation and our divorce. Those who arrived on time were in an uproar over the sudden cancellation. Furthermore, Cliff, faced with questioning guests, coolly continued his delusional talk about finding his true love and marrying the person he truly loved. Escape now with your husband, Maggie. He's beyond reasoning, I whispered to her, pulling her aside, and handing her over to a staff member. She and her husband quickly left through the back door. Cliff, realizing Maggie was gone, became furious. Seeing them walking away outside, he rushed out after them, yelling,
Maggie, wait! Don't go with that guy! Come home with me! Just stop it, Cliff. Don't come near Maggie. Just disappear.
Cliff was easily stopped by Maggie's husband, and then restrained by my father and Jordan, who dragged him back into the venue. I followed, apologizing repeatedly to Maggie and her husband. The guests, having witnessed everything, were thoroughly disgusted and left with remarks like, You're the worst, to Cliff. The event ended with few people remaining. I felt sorry, but with Cliff's rampage, there was little else I could do. In the end, only my friends, parents, and in-laws stayed. They comforted me, and I began to regain some composure. After the cleanup, Cliff said, "Now that it's over, I'm going to Maggie's house," and tried to leave, but was forcefully put into a car by my tearful in-laws. A few days later, with my in-laws present, I got Cliff to sign the divorce papers, successfully finalizing our divorce. I had my in-laws help move Cliff's belongings out of the house or send them by mail. It was a hectic time, but it finally came to an end. One day, while refreshing myself in a suburban town, I ran into Maggie and her husband at a shopping mall. Worried about how they were, I asked about their well-being. They told me that Cliff, undeterred, had been watching the places where they met Maggie, and even followed her to her home and workplace. Cliff had said, "We're still in a relationship, right? You only acted reluctant because you were shy, weren't you?" Cliff apparently kept asking for a reconciliation, saying only what suited him. Maggie finally consulted the police and began legal proceedings against Cliff. Cliff, believing he had done nothing wrong, spouted his delusions in front of the police, leading to him being deemed a dangerous individual. Prompt legal action was taken, and a restraining order was issued against Cliff, preventing him from approaching Maggie. Surprisingly, the restraining order seemed to dampen Cliff's spirits. Facing legal action, he finally realized Maggie truly despised him. Since then, he has apparently stayed away from her. While it no longer matters to me, I'm relieved that Cliff won't trouble Maggie and her husband any further. Maggie continued, "Actually, we're moving soon to a place near my husband's family. We came here today to buy cleaning supplies for the move. Helena, I hope you stay well," she said. I bid them farewell with repeated goodbyes, and they left with smiles. Watching their retreating figures, I silently wished them happiness. This seemed to be the end of the matter. Just as I thought to delete Cliff's contact, surprisingly, he called me. I had kept his number for property division matters, but didn't expect a call. Reluctantly answering the phone, after just meeting with Maggie and her husband, I was worried. "Can we cancel the divorce? Living alone made me realize how important you are, Helena. Let's live together again, cooperatively," I heard Cliff say. After pondering his words for a good 10 seconds, I calmly replied, "That's ridiculous. We're strangers now. No matter what you say, I have no intention of remarrying you. Please don't contact me again." I hung up, setting his number to reject future calls. Cliff kept making noise on the other end, but now I was completely free of him. He tried calling from different numbers for a while, but I ignored them and eventually changed my phone and number, finally finding peace. I've moved out of the house, so there's no worry if he shows up, and there's no way for him to contact me. Maggie and her husband have moved away, and if Cliff showed up at my parents' house, they would angrily turn him away. My in-laws, disillusioned with Cliff after this incident, sold their house. "This house is too close to Maggie's family. We've decided to sell it," Anaya and Jordan said tearfully. It pained me, but I hoped they would find happiness away from Cliff. Now homeless, Cliff was likely wandering alone, his whereabouts unknown. After causing a scene at the wedding, he's rumored and isolated among friends and at work. According to friends working at the same company as Cliff, he has become quite isolated there. It's a clear case of self-inflicted consequences. I sincerely hope he reflects deeply on his actions. As for me, I've started a new life from scratch in a new place. I was invited to join, so I transferred to a new hospital. At my current job, I can balance work and life well, managing both household chores and work responsibilities. Starting afresh in a new environment, learning every day, and having a fulfilling job again is what makes me happiest. I've also built a good relationship at work, and I'm enjoying my days. Although I'm divorced, I am much happier than when I was living with Cliff. This experience has reaffirmed my love for my work. I hope for continued peace and happiness in the days ahead.